Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to another Harry, your story destination. We have an absolute treat for you today. What if Harry's Parseltongue and Wednesday's psychic powers created a new forbidden magic? If you're enjoying these stories, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the stories coming. With that said, let the adventure begin. Chapter 1, Emergence. The restricted section of Ravenscroft Academy's library smelled like old parchment and secrets. Helena Blackwood hunched over a massive tome, her dark hair falling in waves around her face as she frantically scanned the text. 3 years of searching, and finally, a reference to someone like her. Parseltongue manifestations in psychically gifted individuals, she whispered, tracing her finger along the faded text. Documented cases, none. A noise from behind the stacks made her freeze. Footsteps. The library assistant making rounds. Helena slammed the book shut and slid it back onto the shelf, heart pounding. She wasn't supposed to be here. Students needed special permission to access the restricted section, and I have 2 rare magical abilities I'm hiding from everyone wouldn't exactly fly with the administration. She pressed herself against the bookshelf, willing herself to be invisible. The footsteps grew closer. "Hello," called a male voice. "Anyone there?" Helena held her breath. Stupid. She should have waited until later, when fewer people were around. But after overhearing Professor Thornwood mention dual-gifted practitioners in class, she couldn't wait. The footsteps stopped right at the end of her row. "I can see your shadow," the voice said, amused rather than accusatory. "Busted." Helena stepped out from between the shelves, facing a tall guy with sandy brown hair and intelligent eyes. He wasn't wearing the standard Ravenscroft uniform, but rather the gray coat of a graduate researcher. "I was just..." Helena began. "Breaking into the restricted section." He raised an eyebrow. "Bold move." "I'm Damien Frost. Graduate researcher. Helena Blackwood. 3rd year. And I wasn't breaking in, the door was unlocked." Damien laughed. "That's still breaking in, technically. Are you going to report me?" Helena tensed, ready to bolt. Getting expelled wasn't an option. Not when Ravenscroft was the only place that had ever felt close to home. "Depends." Damien leaned against a bookshelf. "What were you looking for?" "Most students sneak in here for love potions or revenge hexes." Helena hesitated. "Information on rare magical abilities." "Any specific ability?" "Just, research for advanced magical theory." "Aha." Damien clearly didn't believe her. "Well, Professor Hargrove doesn't assign just research. He's specific to a fault." Helena adjusted the strap of her bag nervously. "I should go." "The book you were reading, Convergent Magical Phenomena in Singular Practitioners, isn't exactly light reading." Damien's eyes narrowed with interest. "Are you a dual-gifted?" The question hit like ice water. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Relax." Damien held up his hands. "I'm researching rare magical abilities for my thesis. Magical convergence is my specialty." A distant bell chimed, signaling dinner. Helena grabbed the chance to escape. "I really need to go." "Wait." Damien reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. "If you ever want to talk about research, find me. No judgment, I promise." Helena took the card reflexively and hurried past him, heart hammering. She'd been at Ravenscroft for 3 years without anyone suspecting her secrets, and now this guy had gotten dangerously close after one conversation. The corridor outside the library buzzed with students heading to dinner. Helena merged into the crowd, careful not to make eye contact with anyone. She'd gotten good at being invisible when needed. "Hey, Helena." A voice called from behind. She turned to see her roommate, Mina, pushing through the crowd. With her bright pink hair and perpetual smile, Mina was Helena's opposite in almost every way. Missed you in magical creatures, Mina said, falling into step beside her. Professor Willow did the chameleon dragon's demonstration. It was sick. Sorry, I was in the library. Again. You're such a Ravenclaw, I swear. Helena forced a smile. Ravenscroft didn't sort students into houses like in those old books about the British wizarding school, but everyone still used the terms. You coming to dinner? Mina asked. I'm not hungry. Think I'll head back to the room. Mina frowned. You okay? You look spooked. Just tired. If you say so. Mina didn't push it, which was why Helena appreciated her. Don't forget we have that magical history test tomorrow. Thornwood's gonna make it brutal. Right. Thanks for the reminder. They parted ways at the main staircase, Mina heading to the dining hall while Helena climbed toward the east tower where the dormitories were located. She needed space to think. In her room, Helena locked the door and leaned against it, finally allowing herself to breathe. She pulled Damien's card from her pocket. Damien Frost, Magical Convergence Research Fellow, it read, with a communication rune etched in the corner. Helena tossed it onto her desk and flopped onto her bed. The guy seemed harmless enough, but she couldn't risk trusting anyone with her secret. Not when both her abilities were so rare and misunderstood. The Parseltongue had manifested first, when she was 7. Her foster parents had found her conversing with a garden snake and promptly returned her to the orphanage, calling her unnatural. By the time the psychic vision started at 13, Helena had learned to hide anything that made her different. She reached under her bed and pulled out a small wooden box, opening it to reveal a tiny green garden snake. Hello, friend, she hissed in Parseltongue. The snake raised its head, tongue flicking. Warm now. Was cold. Sorry about that. Helena stroked its scales gently. She'd rescued the snake from the groundskeeper's trap last week. I can't keep you here much longer. Someone might find you. Outside good. Food there. Helena smiled. Conversations with snakes were simple, direct. No hidden meanings, no judgment. A sudden splitting headache made her wince. Not now. She recognized the pressure building behind her eyes, a vision coming on. Helena quickly returned the snake to its box and lay back on her bed, closing her eyes as the psychic episode took hold. Images flashed through her mind, a circular room with snake carvings on the walls. A tall woman with silver hair standing over an altar. A green stone glowing. And blood. So much blood. Helena gasped as the vision released her, leaving her drenched in sweat. This one had been stronger than usual, more vivid. Typically, her visions showed mundane events, a pop quiz in potions class, a surprise storm-canceling magical flight practice. Nothing like this. She grabbed her notebook and quickly sketched what she'd seen before the details faded. The circular room seemed familiar somehow, like she'd read about it in a book. A soft knock on the window startled her. Helena looked up to see a small gray owl hovering outside, a note attached to its leg. She opened the window, and the bird flew in, dropping the note on her bed before perching on her desk. The note was written on official Academy stationery. Miss Blackwood, please report to my office immediately regarding your unauthorized presence in the restricted section of the library. Professor Thornwood, Magical History Department, great. Just great. Helena crumpled the note in frustration. Damien must have reported her after all, despite his friendly act. She should have known better than to trust anyone, even for a moment. She quickly changed into a fresh uniform and headed to Professor Thornwood's office, mentally preparing excuses. Maybe she could claim she was looking for supplemental reading for his class. Thornwood was strict but fair, he might let her off with detention. The professor's office was located in the West Tower, requiring Helena to cross the entire campus. Evening had settled over Ravenscroft, the floating lanterns casting a golden glow over the stone pathways. In the distance, the barrier spells shimmered like heat waves around the academy's perimeter. Helena hurried across the courtyard, barely noticing the beauty around her. She was too busy rehearsing explanations in her head. So focused was she that she almost collided with someone standing in the shadows near the tower entrance. "Whoa, careful there," said Damien, steadying her by the shoulders. Helena jerked away from his touch. "You reported me? After all that talk about no judgment?" Confusion crossed his face. "What? I didn't report anyone. Then why is Professor Thornwood summoning me about the restricted section?" "No idea, but it wasn't me." Damien looked genuinely baffled. "I was heading to his office too. He wants to discuss my research proposal." Helena eyed him suspiciously. "That's quite a coincidence." "Maybe. Or maybe not." Damien shrugged. "Thornwood specializes in forbidden magical history. If you're researching rare abilities, and I'm studying magical convergence, it makes sense we'd both end up dealing with him." Before Helena could respond, the tower door opened, and Professor Thornwood himself appeared. Tall and lean with a neatly trimmed silver beard, he surveyed them both with piercing blue eyes. "Ah, Miss Blackwood. Mr. Frost. Excellent timing. Please come in." The professor's office was exactly what you'd expect from a magical history expert: walls lined with books, display cases of historical artifacts, and star charts covering the ceiling. A large desk dominated the center, covered with parchments and open books. "Sit, both of you." Thornwood gestured to two chairs as he settled behind his desk. Helena sat stiffly, hands clenched in her lap. Damien seemed perfectly relaxed beside her. "Miss Blackwood, do you know why I've called you here?" The professor fixed her with his penetrating gaze. "The restricted section," Helena admitted. "No point lying now." "Yes. The restricted section." Thornwood nodded. "More specifically, the book you were examining about convergent magical phenomena." Helena shot a suspicious glance at Damien, who looked as confused as she felt. "How did you know which book I was reading?" The professor smiled slightly. "The books in that section are charmed to report who handles them and for how long. A security measure." "I'm sorry, Professor. I know students need permission." Thornwood waved away her apology. "I'm not concerned about the rule-breaking, Miss Blackwood. I'm interested in why that particular book caught your attention." Helena fell silent, unsure how to respond. "Perhaps," Thornwood continued, "it has something to do with your unusual abilities." The room seemed to tilt. How could he know? "I don't, Miss Blackwood." The professor's voice softened. "I've been teaching for 40 years. I recognize the signs of a student hiding gifts they don't understand." "I haven't seen any signs," Damien interjected, looking at Helena with new interest. "You wouldn't," Thornwood replied. "Miss Blackwood has become quite skilled at concealment. But certain magic leaves traces that experienced practitioners can detect." Helena's heart pounded. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing nefarious, I assure you." Thornwood leaned forward. "I want to help. Dual gifts are rare and often misunderstood. That's actually why I asked Mr. Frost to join us. His research may be relevant to your situation." "So you're saying she's dual-gifted?" Damien asked, excitement creeping into his voice. "That's for Miss Blackwood to confirm." The professor turned back to Helena. "Well?" Helena looked between them, weighing her options. 3 years of secrecy, of carefully avoiding detection, and now she was supposed to just admit everything to a professor she barely knew and a graduate student she'd met hours ago. But something in Thornwood's eyes, a knowing kindness, made her hesitate. "What if I am?" she finally said. "What difference does it make?" "Potentially an enormous difference," Thornwood replied. "Especially given what the library charms recorded about your handling of that specific book." "What do you mean?" When you touched the section on Parseltongue manifestations in psychically gifted individuals, the magical sensors registered a very unusual reaction. Helena went cold. What kind of reaction? A convergence spike. Damien answered before the professor could. That's what you detected, isn't it, Professor? Her abilities resonated with the text. Thornwood nodded. Precisely, Mr. Frost. Which is why I thought your research might be applicable. Helena stood abruptly. I should go. Please, Miss Blackwood. Thornwood's voice was gentle but firm. Sit down. No one is judging you here. But if I'm right about what you can do, you may be in danger. That stopped her. Danger? From who? From those who seek rare magical abilities for their own purposes. Please, sit. Let me explain. Reluctantly, Helena returned to her seat. Am I correct in assuming you possess both Parseltongue abilities and some form of psychic gift? Thornwood asked. After a long moment, Helena nodded. Yes. Damien let out a low whistle. That's incredibly rare. Like, 1 in a million rare. 1 in several million, actually, Thornwood corrected. And potentially far more significant than mere statistical rarity. Have your abilities ever interacted with each other? Helena frowned. Interacted? No. They're completely separate. Are you certain? The professor leaned forward. No incidents where both manifested simultaneously? No. Never. Thornwood exchanged a glance with Damien. That's unusual in itself. Typically, when multiple magical gifts exist in one practitioner, there's some level of convergence, a blending or interaction between the abilities. Which is what I'm researching, Damien added. How different magical talents can combine to create entirely new forms of magic. So what? Helena shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant despite her racing pulse. Maybe my abilities just don't mix. Or perhaps, Thornwood said thoughtfully, they haven't been triggered to do so yet. A strange tension filled the room. Helena looked between the two men, suddenly uneasy. What aren't you telling me? Thornwood sighed and stood, walking to one of his bookshelves. He selected an ancient-looking tome bound in what appeared to be snakeskin. Have you ever heard of serpent mediums, Miss Blackwood? No. They were practitioners who could communicate with the dead through serpentine conduits. He placed the book on the desk, open to an illustration of a robed figure surrounded by snakes, with ghostly forms emerging from their mouths. They existed centuries ago, primarily in regions where both Parseltongue and psychic abilities were more common. Helena stared at the illustration. It sent an odd shiver through her. What happened to them? She asked. They were hunted to extinction, Thornwood said grimly. Their abilities were considered unnatural, a perversion of the barrier between life and death. But that's ridiculous, Damien interjected. Necromancers have existed in various forms throughout magical history. True, but serpent mediums were different, Thornwood explained. They didn't control the dead or reanimate corpses. They communicated with the deceased, learned from them, sometimes even channeled their abilities temporarily. Some cultures revered them as holy figures, bridges between worlds. Others feared them as abominations. And you think I could be one of these? Serpent mediums? Helena asked skeptically. Not yet, Thornwood replied. But you have the potential. The prerequisite abilities. Under the right circumstances, a convergence could occur. What circumstances? That's less clear, the professor admitted. Historical accounts suggest intense emotion, danger, or necessity often triggers magical convergence. Helena thought of her recent vision, the circular room, the snake carvings, the blood. A chill ran down her spine. Who would want these abilities? She asked, remembering Thornwood's warning about danger. The professor's expression darkened. Various groups collect rare magical talents. Some for study, others for exploitation. The most persistent is the Veiled Covenant, collectors of forgotten and forbidden magic. I've heard of them, Damien said. Thought they were just academic boogeymen. Very real, I'm afraid, Thornwood replied. And they've become increasingly active in recent years. A clock chimed somewhere in the office, startling Helena. It was already 9 o'clock. It's getting late, Thornwood noted. Miss Blackwood, I've given you a lot to think about. All I ask is that you be cautious. Don't demonstrate your abilities publicly, and come to me immediately if anything unusual occurs. Like what? You'll know it if it happens, he said cryptically. Mr. Frost, please continue with your research proposal tomorrow. I think we've covered enough for one evening. As they left the office, Helena's mind was racing. Serpent mediums. The Veiled Covenant. It was too much to process. Hey, Damien said as they descended the tower stairs. You okay? Fine. Helena's tone made it clear she wasn't interested in talking. Look, I know this is a lot. But if you want to discuss it, I don't. Helena stopped and faced him. I don't know you, and I'm not interested in becoming a research subject for your thesis. Damien looked genuinely hurt. That's not what I was offering. Isn't it? Rare magical convergence is literally your specialty. Yes, but that doesn't mean, just leave me alone, okay? Helena pushed past him and hurried down the corridor, not looking back. She didn't slow her pace until she reached the East Tower. The common room was still busy with students studying, chatting, and playing magical games. Helena slipped through without engaging anyone and retreated to her room, relieved to find it empty. Mina must still be at dinner or studying with friends. Once alone, Helena sank onto her bed, overwhelmed. For years, she'd kept her abilities secret, convinced that revealing them would lead to rejection or worse. Now Professor Thornwood not only knew about both gifts but suggested they could combine into something even more unusual. The snake box under her bed rustled, reminding her of her tiny friend. Helena pulled it out and opened the lid. You okay? She hissed in Parseltongue. The little green snake raised its head. Human worried. Smell fear. Helena smiled despite herself. I'm fine. Just confused. Confusion passes. Hunger stays. Hunt soon. Tomorrow, Helena promised. I'll take you to the gardens tomorrow. A knock at the door startled her. Helena quickly returned the snake to its hiding place before opening the door. Mina stood there, pink hair now tied in a messy bun, holding a plate of food. Brought you dinner. You missed shepherd's pie night. Thanks. Helena accepted the plate gratefully, suddenly realizing she was starving. So, Mina said, flopping onto her own bed as Helena ate, what did Professor Thornwood want? Heard he summoned you to his office. News traveled fast at Ravenscroft. Just a question about my essay. Aha. Mina didn't look convinced. And it had nothing to do with that cute research fellow who was in there with you. Helena nearly choked on her pie. You know Damien? Everyone knows Damien Frost. He's only the most talented magical researcher to come through Ravenscroft in decades. Mina wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. Plus, he's hot. It wasn't like that, Helena muttered. Sure. Just two academically minded people discussing scholarly things. Mina grinned. Seriously though, what's he like up close? I've only seen him lecturing. Annoying, Helena said flatly. Nosy. Ouch. Struck out already? It wasn't like that, Helena repeated more forcefully. Can we drop it? I need to study for Thornwood's test. Fine. Mina held up her hands in surrender. But just so you know, half the school would kill to be summoned to a private meeting with Damien Frost. Helena ignored her, pulling out her magical history textbook. She tried to focus on the text, but her mind kept wandering to Thornwood's warning and the strange illustration of the serpent mediums. She found herself sketching the circular room from her vision in the margin of her notebook without realizing it. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Helena tossed and turned, her dreams filled with snakes that spoke with the voices of the dead. Morning arrived with weak sunshine filtering through the dormitory windows. Helena woke feeling groggy but determined. After her conversation with Thornwood, she needed to learn more about these serpent mediums and what it could mean for her. She had magical history first thing after breakfast, and the dreaded test. Helena dressed quickly and headed to the dining hall, grabbing toast and coffee before making her way to Thornwood's classroom. She arrived early, hoping to ask the professor a few more questions, but found the room empty except for a note on the board stating that class was cancelled and the test postponed. Strange. Thornwood never cancelled class. Disappointed about the test, a voice asked from the doorway. Helena turned to see Damien leaning against the frame, that same infuriating half-smile on his face. "Do you follow me around or something? Paranoid much?" He entered the room. "I was looking for Thornwood too. He's not in his office either." That was concerning. "Is that normal?" "No." Damien's expression turned serious. "Especially after our conversation last night." A bad feeling settled in Helena's stomach. "You think something happened to him?" "I don't know. But it's odd that he'd disappear right after revealing knowledge of rare magical abilities and warning about people who might be interested in them." Put like that, it did seem ominous. "Maybe he just got sick," Helena suggested, not quite believing it herself. "Maybe." Damien didn't sound convinced. "Have you had any unusual experiences since last night?" "No." Helena hesitated. "Well, just dreams. Nothing real." "What kind of dreams?" She almost told him about the snake speaking with dead voices, but stopped herself. "Just weird stuff. Not important." Damien looked like he wanted to push further but changed tack. "I did some research after our meeting. About serpent mediums." Despite herself, Helena was interested. "And?" "They weren't just communicators with the dead. According to some sources, they could temporarily imbue serpents with the spirits of the deceased, creating vessels for specific knowledge or abilities." "Like possession?" "More like consensual channeling. The spirits wouldn't take over, they'd share space, offering guidance or power." Helena thought about her little green snake friend. The idea of putting someone else's spirit into it seemed wrong somehow. "That sounds invasive." "It could be," Damien acknowledged. Like any powerful magic, it depended on the practitioner's intentions. Students began filtering into the classroom, ending their private conversation. Someone had apparently removed Thornwood's cancellation notice. "That's weird," Damien murmured. A moment later, the classroom door opened, and a woman entered, definitely not Professor Thornwood. Tall and elegant with silver blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, she wore formal academic robes that somehow looked more like fashion than uniform. Helena froze. The woman from her vision. "Good morning, students," the woman said in a crisp, authoritative voice. "I am Professor Lilith Vane. Professor Thornwood has been called away on urgent business, and I will be substituting for the foreseeable future." Whispers rippled through the classroom. Substitute teachers weren't unusual at Ravenscroft, but something about this woman set Helena's nerves on edge. "Mr. Frost," Professor Vane addressed Damien directly. "I believe you have your own studies to attend to. This is an undergraduate class." Damien looked taken aback. "I was supposed to meet with Professor Thornwood. As I said, he's been called away. I'll be handling his graduate advisees as well. Please see me during office hours." The dismissal was clear. Damien glanced at Helena, a warning in his eyes, before nodding to Vane and leaving the classroom. "Now then," Vane continued, surveying the room. Her gaze lingered slightly on Helena. I understand you were preparing for an examination on the magical purges of the 17th century. We'll postpone that until next week to allow me to cover the material properly. Relief swept through the class, but Helena barely noticed. Something about Vane seemed off. The way she scanned the room felt less like a teacher assessing students and more like a predator searching for prey. Instead, Vane continued, "Today we'll discuss a more specialized topic, magical extinction events. Specifically, how certain magical practices and abilities have been deliberately eradicated throughout history." Helena's pulse quickened. Of all the topics Vane could have chosen. Can anyone name a magical ability that was systematically removed from the population? Vane asked. Silence filled the room. Then, slowly, Helena raised her hand. Vane's eyes locked onto her. "Yes, Miss Blackwood. Helena Blackwood. Miss Blackwood. Your answer." Helena swallowed. "Parseltongue. In some regions." Something flashed in Vane's eyes, recognition. Interest. It was gone too quickly to identify. Excellent example. Parseltongue speakers were indeed hunted in certain European regions during the 14th century, though the ability persisted elsewhere. Vane paced slowly across the front of the room. Can anyone suggest why certain magical abilities were targeted? Another student raised a hand. Fear. People fear what they don't understand. A simplistic but not incorrect assessment, Vane nodded. Fear certainly plays a role. But more often, extinction events were orchestrated by those who understood the abilities all too well, and recognized their potential power. The lecture continued, with Vane detailing various historical purges of magical abilities. Helena took notes mechanically, her mind racing. The coincidence was too great. First Thornwood warns her about people seeking rare abilities, then he disappears, and his replacement immediately lectures on magical extinction events. When class ended, Helena gathered her things quickly, intending to leave before Vane could single her out. She didn't make it. "Miss Blackwood, a moment please." Helena froze, then slowly approached the professor's desk. "Yes, Professor Vane." Up close, Vane was even more intimidating. Her eyes were an unusual amber color that seemed almost to glow in certain light. "Your answer about Parseltongue was quite specific," Vane said. "Do you have a particular interest in extinct magical abilities?" "Not really. I just remembered it from Professor Thornwood's previous lectures." "I see." Vane studied her so intently that Helena wondered if the woman could read minds. Professor Thornwood mentioned several promising students in his notes. "Your name was among them." "That's flattering." Helena shifted uncomfortably. "He also noted your interest in dual-gifted practitioners. A fascinating area of study." Helena's mouth went dry. "It was just for a paper." "Of course." Vane smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Well, don't let me keep you from your next class. Though if you'd like to discuss the topic further, my door is always open." "Thank you, Professor." Helena hurried from the room, heart pounding. That hadn't felt like an innocent academic conversation. It had felt like an interrogation, or worse, a hunt. She was so distracted that she walked straight into someone in the corridor. "Whoa, easy," Damien steadied her. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Were you waiting for me?" Helena demanded. "Yes," he admitted without shame. "That woman gives me the creeps." "What did she want?" "To ask about my interest in Parseltongue and dual-gifted practitioners." Helena lowered her voice. "Thornwood told her about me." "That doesn't sound like him." Damien frowned. "He was warning you about people interested in your abilities just last night." "Well, she knew. She said my name was in his notes." "Or she's lying." Damien glanced back toward the classroom. "Look, something's wrong. Thornwood disappears, this woman shows up teaching exactly what we discussed, it's not a coincidence." As much as Helena hated to admit it, he was right. What do we do? We need to find out more about her. And check Thornwood's office for any sign of what happened. Damien looked around to ensure no one was listening. Can you meet me tonight? After curfew, near the West Tower? Everything in Helena screamed that this was a bad idea, but she nodded anyway. Fine. Midnight. Perfect. And Helena? Damien's expression was dead serious. Be careful today. Don't be alone if you can help it. I can take care of myself, she replied automatically. I'm sure you can. But we don't know what we're dealing with. Classes dragged that day. Helena went through the motions, taking notes and answering questions when called upon, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept seeing Vane's penetrating amber eyes, kept hearing Thornwood's warnings about people who collected rare magical abilities. Dinner was a tense affair, with Helena picking at her food while scanning the faculty table. Vane sat in Thornwood's usual place, engaged in conversation with the headmistress. Nothing in her demeanor suggested anything sinister, but Helena couldn't shake her suspicion. Earth to Helena, Mina waved a hand in front of her face. You've been staring at the new professor for 10 minutes straight. Crushing on her too? What? No. I just... Helena struggled for an explanation. Don't you think it's weird how Professor Thornwood just disappeared? Mina shrugged. Professors leave for research all the time. Remember when Professor Willow vanished for a month to study those fire salamanders in Iceland? But that was planned. This seems sudden. Maybe, but the school wouldn't bring in a substitute if it wasn't legitimate. Mina followed Helena's gaze to Vane. Though I get why you're staring. She's gorgeous in that Ice Queen way. That's not why I'm looking at her, Helena muttered. Then why? You've been acting weird all day. Helena hesitated. She trusted Mina more than most people, but sharing even part of what was happening felt dangerous. Just tired, she finally said. Bad dreams last night. If you say so. Mina didn't push, another reason Helena appreciated her. Want to study in the common room tonight? I'm still freaking out about magical transformations. Can't. I have a thing. A thing? Mina raised her eyebrows. With tall, blonde, and researcher Y. No. Helena protested too quickly. Oh my God, it totally is. Mina squealed. Spill. Now. It's not like that. It's just a project thing. Aha. A project at night. Very academic. Mina grinned. Well, don't let me stop you from your important research. Helena rolled her eyes, but she was secretly grateful for Mina's misinterpretation. Better that her roommate think she was sneaking out for a romantic rendezvous than know the truth. As curfew approached, Helena prepared carefully. She changed into dark clothes and packed her bag with a few essentials, her notebook, a small magical light, and a wooden box containing her snake. She wasn't sure why she was bringing the snake, but something told her it might be useful. At 11:45, she slipped out of bed, relieved to hear Mina's soft snoring from the other side of the room. The dormitory corridors were dark and quiet as Helena made her way down the stairs and through the common room. A couple of seventh years were still studying by the fireplace but didn't look up as she passed. The main halls of Ravenscroft were patrolled after curfew, but Helena had long ago mapped the blind spots in the security system. She stuck to shadows and lesser-used corridors, working her way toward the West Tower. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light through the tall windows and creating pools of brightness she carefully avoided. She reached their meeting point at exactly midnight. No sign of Damien. Helena waited in the shadows of an alcove, listening for approaching footsteps. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Had he set her up? Or had something happened to him too? Just as she was considering returning to her dorm, a hand touched her shoulder. Helena nearly screamed before a palm covered her mouth. "Shoo! It's me," Damien whispered, removing his hand. "Sorry I'm late. Had to dodge Vane, she's patrolling the halls." "Professors don't usually patrol," Helena whispered back. "Exactly. Something's up." Damien pulled something from his pocket, a small silver key. "I managed to duplicate Thornwood's office key earlier. Come on." They crept up the spiral staircase of the West Tower, freezing at every creak and groan of the ancient building. Finally, they reached Thornwood's office door. Damien inserted the key, turned it slowly, and the lock clicked open. Inside, the office looked much as it had the night before, books everywhere, artifacts in display cases, star charts on the ceiling. But subtle differences caught Helena's attention. Papers that had been stacked on the desk were now in neat folders. Books had been rearranged on the shelves. "Someone's been searching," Damien murmured, examining the desk. "For what?" "Not sure. But look at this." He pointed to a drawer that was slightly ajar. Thornwood was meticulous about locking everything. Helena approached the drawer and pulled it open further. Inside was a single piece of parchment with hurried writing: "If found, Vane is VC. Serpent room beneath library. Convergence catalyst stolen. HB in danger. Contact council immediately." "VC," Damien whispered. "Veiled Covenant. And HB, that's me." Helena's blood ran cold. Thornwood was trying to warn someone. The serpent room must be the circular chamber from the old texts about serpent mediums. Damien looked grim. "And if Vane has the convergence catalyst?" "What's a convergence catalyst?" "An artifact that can trigger magical convergence under the right conditions. Extremely rare and dangerous." A noise from the corridor made them both freeze. Footsteps, coming closer. "Hide," Damien hissed, pulling Helena behind a large bookshelf. The office door opened, and Lilith Vane entered, illuminating the room with a wave of her hand. She moved directly to the desk and began rifling through the drawers. "Where is it, Elias?" she muttered. "You wouldn't leave without securing it." She pulled open the drawer they had just examined, finding the note. A cold smile spread across her face as she read it. "Oh, Elias. Still trying to protect your precious students." She crumpled the note and incinerated it with a flick of her fingers. Too late. Vane continued searching, opening books, checking behind artifacts. She paused at the bookshelf where they were hiding, running her fingers along the spines inches from where Helena stood holding her breath. "Professor Vane." A voice called from the corridor. "Is everything all right?" It was the headmistress. Vane quickly composed herself. "Yes, headmistress. Just familiarizing myself with Professor Thornwood's materials." "At this hour?" "I'm afraid I'm a bit of a night owl." Vane's tone was smooth, apologetic. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "Well, try to keep regular hours, Professor. Students notice when faculty behave unusually." The headmistress's voice carried a hint of suspicion. "Of course. My apologies." Footsteps retreated down the corridor. Vane waited a moment, then cursed under her breath. "Meddling woman," she muttered, giving the office one last scan before leaving, closing the door behind her. Helena and Damien remained frozen for several minutes, ensuring she was truly gone before emerging from their hiding place. "She's looking for something specific," Damien said. "And she's definitely Veiled Covenant." Helena retrieved the parchment from her pocket. She'd snatched Thornwood's note seconds before Vane had reached for it, leaving her to find a blank piece she'd mistaken for the original in the dim light. "We need to find this serpent room." "Beneath the library," Damien murmured. "There are old catacombs under Ravenscroft, but I've never heard of a serpent room specifically." Helena's vision flashed in her mind, the circular room with snake carvings. "I think I know what it looks like. I saw it in a dream." Damien gave her an odd look but didn't question her. Can you find it? Maybe. But not tonight. Vane's still out there, and the headmistress is suspicious. Tomorrow then. After classes. Why are you helping me? Helena asked suddenly. This could be dangerous. Damien's expression turned serious. Because Thornwood was my mentor. Because the Veiled Covenant has destroyed lives in their quest for magical power. And because. He hesitated, if you really do have the potential for this convergence magic, I don't want to see it exploited. It wasn't entirely altruistic, Helena noted. The researcher in him was clearly fascinated by her abilities. But his concern seemed genuine enough. Fine. Tomorrow after magical creatures. Meet me at the library's north entrance. They carefully exited the office, locking it behind them, and separated to return to their respective quarters. Helena used every trick she'd learned over 3 years of occasional nighttime wandering to avoid detection. She made it back to her room without incident and collapsed onto her bed, exhausted but too wired to sleep. The snake box rustled under her bed. Coming, she hissed quietly, retrieving the box and opening it. The little green snake slithered onto her palm. Human scared, it observed. Smell fear again. Yes, Helena admitted. Bad things happening. What bad? How did you explain complex human dangers to a snake? Other humans want to hurt me. The snake's tongue flicked rapidly. Bite them. Venom good. Helena smiled despite herself. You're not venomous, little one. Pretend. Scare away. If only it were that simple. Sleep now, Helena told the snake, placing it back in its box. Tomorrow might be difficult. Sleep eventually came, but it was fitful and filled with dreams of snakes speaking with the voices of the dead. In one particularly vivid sequence, Helena stood in a circular room from her vision, surrounded by serpents. They spoke to her in Thornwood's voice, the catalyst activates in blood. Be careful, Helena. Blood calls to blood. She woke with a gasp as dawn light filtered through the dormitory windows. The dream lingered, unusually clear for a fading night vision. Blood calls to blood, she whispered. What did that mean? Classes that day were torturous. Helena went through the motions, taking notes and answering questions, but her mind was on the meeting with Damien and the search for the serpent room. Vane taught magical history again, continuing her lecture on extinct magical practices with a focus on those involving communion with the dead. While most societies develop some form of necromancy, Vane explained, few achieved the sophistication of the serpent mediums, who could channel specific deceased individuals rather than simply raising mindless corpses. She was dropping hints, Helena realized. Testing to see if anyone in the class showed particular interest or knowledge. Helena kept her expression carefully neutral, despite the chill that ran down her spine every time Vane's amber gaze fell on her. Finally, the last class of the day, Magical Creatures, ended, and Helena rushed to the library's north entrance. Damien was already waiting, looking tense. Ready? He asked as she approached. Helena nodded, patting her bag where the snake box was hidden. I think the entrance might be in the restricted section. That's where most of the old architecture is preserved. Makes sense. How do we get in without being caught this time? Helena pulled a slip of paper from her pocket. I got permission. Told Professor Willow I needed to research magical serpent species for a project. Clever. Damien looked impressed. They entered the library, which was busy with afternoon study groups. The librarian checked Helena's permission slip and waved them through to the restricted section without much interest. Once alone among the ancient shelves, Helena closed her eyes, trying to recall the details of her vision and dream. We're looking for snake symbols. Possibly carved into the floor or walls. They searched methodically, checking every bookshelf, alcove, and decorative panel. The restricted section was vast, with many small reading rooms and study nooks branching off from the main area. Nothing, Damien said after nearly an hour. Maybe we're interpreting Thornwood's note wrong. No, it's here. I know it. Helena's frustration was mounting. She leaned against a bookshelf, accidentally pressing an ornate carving of an owl. The shelf shifted slightly. Wait. Helena examined the carving more closely. It wasn't an owl at all, but a coiled serpent seen from above. Damien, look at this. He joined her, studying the carving. Push it again. Helena pressed the serpent carving firmly. A grinding noise came from behind the bookshelf, which slowly swung inward to reveal a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. Bingo, Damien whispered. They exchanged a look of apprehension mixed with excitement. I'll go first, Helena said, pulling out her magical light and illuminating the stairs. The passage was ancient, the stone steps worn smooth by centuries of use. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, suggesting it hadn't been used in decades, or had been made to look that way. They descended in silence, the air growing cooler and damper with each step. At the bottom, the passage opened into a circular chamber exactly like the one from Helena's vision. Snake carvings covered the walls, their ruby eyes glinting in the light. In the center stood a stone altar, its surface stained dark with what might have been old blood. The serpent room, Damien breathed. It's real. Helena approached the altar slowly. Something about the room resonated with her on a level she couldn't explain. The snake in her bag became agitated, rustling against the wooden box. What is this place exactly? She asked, running her fingers along the altar's edge. A convergence chamber, I think. Damien examined the snake carvings. Places like this were built to amplify magical energies, particularly those involving transformation or combination of powers. The snake's rustling grew more insistent. Helena opened her bag and took out the box, allowing the little green serpent to slither onto her palm. Spirits here, it hissed urgently. Many spirits. Helena froze. What did you say? Spirits. Watching. Waiting. The snake's tongue flicked rapidly, tasting the air. Old spirits. Strong. What's it saying? Damien asked, watching the exchange with fascination. It says there are spirits here. Helena looked around the chamber warily. Watching us. As if triggered by her words, the ruby eyes of the snake carvings began to glow brighter. A low humming filled the air, vibrating through Helena's bones. Something's happening, Damien backed away from the wall. We should go. But Helena couldn't move. The humming seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat, growing louder and more insistent. The snake on her palm began to glow with the same ruby light as the carvings. Helena. Damien's voice sounded distant. Helena, snap out of it. She couldn't respond. Words in a language she'd never heard filled her mind, ancient and powerful. Without conscious thought, Helena found herself speaking them aloud, her voice blending with the humming of the chamber. Serpens spiritus, veni ad me. Mortuorum voces, loci per serpens. The snake in her hand rose up, its tiny body elongating and thickening. Its scales shimmered with ruby light, and its eyes glowed like embers. Helena Blackwood, the snake said, not in the simple Parseltongue she was used to, but in a human voice, deep and resonant. At last, a worthy vessel. Damien grabbed her shoulder. Helena, put the snake down. Now. She couldn't. Her hand seemed fused to the serpent, which continued to grow, coiling around her arm. Who are you? Helena managed to ask the snake. I am Ophion, first of the serpent mediums. The snake's voice echoed in the chamber. For centuries I have waited for one with the dual gift. And now you have come. What do you want from me? To teach. To guide. To restore what was lost. The snake, Ophion, fixed her with its glowing eyes. Your power is unrefined, unfocused. I can help you master it. Don't listen, Damien warned. This is exactly how the Veiled Covenant operates. They use ancient spirits to manipulate people with rare abilities. The boy knows nothing, Ophion hissed dismissively. The Covenant are mere children playing with forces they cannot comprehend. You and I could restore the true path of the serpent mediums. The humming grew louder, almost painful. Helena felt something building inside her, a convergence of her Parseltongue and psychic abilities, amplified by whatever magic saturated this chamber. How? She asked, even as part of her scream to run. Blood calls to blood, Ophion replied. The catalyst requires sacrifice to activate fully. Give me your blood, and I will show you power beyond imagining. Blood. Helena remembered her dream, Thornwood's warning. The catalyst activates in blood. Helena, don't. Damien tried to pull her away from the altar, but some invisible force held her in place. The snake's eyes gleamed with hunger. A drop only. A small price for such knowledge. Something wasn't right. Helena could feel it through the haze of whatever magic was affecting her. This wasn't a benevolent spirit offering guidance. This was something more dangerous. No, she said firmly, fighting against the compulsion. I don't need your power. The snake's expression changed, anger replacing persuasion. Fool. You think you have a choice. The convergence has begun. It will complete, with or without your consent. The ruby light intensified, and pain shot through Helena's arm where the snake coiled. She could feel her abilities being pulled toward each other, forced to merge unnaturally. Damien, she gasped. Help me. He was searching frantically around the chamber. There must be a way to disrupt the ritual. These chambers always have a failsafe. The eyes, Helena realized suddenly. The ruby eyes control it. Damien followed her gaze to the snake carvings and their glowing eyes. Cover your ears, he shouted before pointing his wand at the nearest carving and blasting the ruby from its socket. A deafening shriek filled the chamber as the disrupted magic lashed out. The snake on Helena's arm convulsed, its grip loosening. Again, she cried. Damien fired spell after spell, shattering rubies throughout the chamber. With each broken stone, the humming decreased and Ophion's form diminished. No, the snake hissed, now barely larger than its original size. You deny your destiny. I make my own destiny, Helena replied, finally pulling the snake from her arm and throwing it onto the altar. The moment the serpent touched the stone, a blinding flash of ruby light erupted. Helena and Damien were thrown backward against the wall. When the light faded, the snake was gone, and the chamber was silent. They sat stunned for several minutes, catching their breath. What, Damien finally gasped, the hell was that? A trap, Helena replied, examining the angry red mark on her arm where Ophion had coiled. Not for us specifically, but for anyone with the potential to become a serpent medium. But why? Who would set something like this up? Someone who wanted to control serpent mediums rather than hunt them. Helena stood shakily. Maybe the Veiled Covenant didn't start as collectors. Maybe they were originally protectors who became corrupted. Damien looked thoughtful. That would explain a lot about their organization. Thornwood once mentioned they began with noble intentions. Speaking of Thornwood. Helena approached the altar again, more cautiously this time. Without the magical humming and glowing eyes, it was just an ancient stone table with strange carvings. I think he was trying to warn us about this place. The convergence catalyst he mentioned must be whatever powered this chamber. But Vane doesn't have it, Damien realized. That's why she was searching his office. He must have hidden it before he disappeared. Which means she can't complete whatever ritual she's planning. Not yet, anyway. A noise from the staircase made them both whirl around. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Hide, Damien whispered, pulling Helena behind one of the larger snake carvings. They crouched in the shadows as the footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. Lilith Vane entered the chamber, her amber eyes scanning every corner. She went directly to the altar, running her hands over its surface. Activated, she murmured. Recently. But interrupted. She examined the walls, noting the shattered rubies. Clever. Very clever. Vane reached into her robes and removed a small object, a green stone that pulsed with inner light. The catalyst, Damien breathed in Helena's ear. But Thornwood's note said it was stolen, she whispered back. He was wrong. Or misled us deliberately. Vane placed the stone in a small depression on the altar that Helena hadn't noticed before. It fit perfectly, and immediately began to glow brighter. Soon, Vane said to the empty chamber. The girl will come to me willingly once she understands what's happening to her. The convergence has begun, whether she wants it or not. She retrieved the stone and left the chamber, her footsteps fading up the staircase. Helena and Damien remained hidden until they were certain she was gone. She knows we were here, Helena said, emerging from their hiding place. And she knows the convergence has started somehow. What did she mean? It's begun whether you want it or not. Damien looked worried. Helena touched the mark on her arm, which had begun to throb painfully. I think when Ophion tried to force the convergence, he managed to start the process before we interrupted it. I can feel something changing. We need help. Professional help. From who? Vane is posing as a professor, and we have no idea where Thornwood is. Who would believe us? Damien thought for a moment. There's someone who might. My research advisor from the Magical Academy of Advanced Studies. She specializes in magical amalgamation, the combining of different magical disciplines. Can you contact her? Yes, but it will take time to reach her and for her to travel here. Until then. He looked at the mark on Helena's arm with concern. We need to monitor whatever's happening to you. They left the serpent room, carefully sealing the entrance behind them. The library was quieter now, with dinner time approaching. They slipped out without attracting attention and found a secluded courtyard to continue their conversation. What does it feel like? Damien asked, examining the mark more closely. It had taken on a strange pattern, like scales forming under her skin. Hard to describe. Helena flexed her fingers, wincing. Like my abilities are, reaching for each other. When I try to access my Parseltongue, I get flashes of psychic images. When I focus on my psychic sense, I hear whispering in Parseltongue. The convergence is happening naturally now that it's been triggered. Damien looked both concerned and fascinated. But without the catalyst to control it, it could be dangerous. Great, Helena muttered. So either Vane gets the catalyst and controls my abilities, or I go through an uncontrolled magical convergence that might kill me. Fantastic options. There might be a third option. Damien's expression turned thoughtful. What if we controlled the convergence ourselves? On our terms, not Vane's. How? We don't have the catalyst. No, but we have knowledge of how the process works. And my advisor might know more about managing magical convergence safely. Helena wasn't convinced. That's a big might, Damien. Do you have a better idea? She didn't, and they both knew it. Fine. Contact your advisor. But in the meantime, I need to figure out what's happening to me before it gets worse. We should meet daily to track the changes, Damien suggested. Somewhere private. The old observatory in the East Tower. No one uses it since they built the new one. Perfect. Tomorrow morning before classes? Helena nodded, then glanced at the darkening sky. I should go. Dinner's starting, and Mina will wonder where I am. Be careful, Damien warned. And if anything changes, anything at all, find me immediately. They parted ways, each lost in thought. Helena headed to the dining hall, her mind racing with everything they'd discovered. The serpent room, the ancient spirit Ophion, Vane's plans, and now this convergence process affecting her body and magic. It was overwhelming. She entered the dining hall, searching for Mina's pink hair in the crowd. Instead, her gaze locked with Lilith Vane's amber eyes at the faculty table. The professor smiled coldly, raising her glass slightly as if in toast. She knows, Helena realized with a chill. She knows exactly who I am and what's happening to me. The question was, what would Vane do next? And how could Helena stop her when her own magic was changing in unpredictable ways? As if in answer, the mark on her arm throbbed painfully, and for a brief moment, Helena heard whispers, not in Parseltongue, but in human voices, dozens of them overlapping. The voices of the dead, reaching through the veil, drawn to her transforming abilities. The convergence wasn't just combining her magical talents. It was creating something new and potentially dangerous. Something the Veiled Covenant wanted badly enough to infiltrate Ravenscroft and target a student. Whatever happened next, Helena knew one thing for certain: she couldn't let Vane win. Too much depended on keeping this power, her power, from those who would abuse it. Strengthening her resolve, Helena joined Mina at the Ravenscroft table, determined to appear normal despite the extraordinary circumstances. Tomorrow she would begin learning to control her emerging abilities, with or without the catalyst. The alternative was unthinkable. Chapter 2, Resonance. 3 weeks after discovering the serpent room, Helena stood in front of the observatory mirror, examining the changes to her arm. The scale-like pattern had spread from her wrist to her elbow, shimmering faintly in certain light. Not painful anymore, just different. Still spreading? Damien asked, looking up from his notebook where he'd been documenting her transformation. Slower than before. Helena rolled down her sleeve. And I'm getting better at controlling the side effects. That was putting it mildly. For the first week after their encounter with Ophion, Helena had experienced random bursts of both abilities simultaneously, hearing the whispers of the dead while trying to speak Parseltongue, or having visions triggered by the sight of anything remotely serpentine. She'd broken 3 beakers in potions class when a vision hit after seeing a snake ingredient, and nearly revealed her Parseltongue when a garden snake slithered past during herbology, bringing with it the whispered voice of a long-dead gardener. "Show me the separation technique again," Damien said, setting his notebook aside. Helena nodded, closing her eyes and visualizing her abilities as 2 distinct energies, Parseltongue a green current, psychic power a purple one. In the beginning, they'd swirled together chaotically. Now, with practice, she could mentally direct them into separate channels. "Hello," she hissed in perfect Parseltongue, without any psychic interference. "Good," Damien noted. "Now try the other way." Helena shifted her mental image, allowing the purple energy forward while containing the green. She focused on Damien, opening her psychic awareness. "You're worried about your advisor's response," she said, catching fragments of his surface thoughts. "She's delayed again." Damien looked impressed and frustrated simultaneously. 2 more days. Border security's been tightened after those artifacts were stolen from the National Repository. "That's 4 delays in 3 weeks, Helena said, letting go of the psychic channel with relief. It always left her with a headache. Maybe she's not coming. She'll be here. Professor Winters doesn't break her promises." Damien ran a hand through his hair. "But I'm concerned about the timing. The expedition leaves tomorrow, and you'll be gone for 3 days. "It's perfect timing, actually," Helena countered. "Vane will be busy supervising the other students. I'll be able to explore the ruins without her watching my every move." Vane had become an increasingly ominous presence at Ravenscroft over the past weeks. Though she hadn't made any direct moves against Helena, her amber eyes seemed to track the girl's every movement. Twice, Helena had caught Vane trying to recruit other students to keep an eye on Miss Blackwood's activities. Thankfully, most students found Vane too intimidating to become her informants. "The ruins could trigger your abilities in unpredictable ways," Damien warned. "They were specifically built by serpent-worshipping cultures. Which is exactly why I need to go. Helena gathered her books. If I'm going to understand what's happening to me, I need to learn more about the history of people like me. Just promise you'll be careful. Damien's concern showed plainly on his face. We still don't know what Vane's planning, or where Thornwood is. Their search for the missing professor had hit dead end after dead end. The headmistress insisted he was on a research sabbatical, but none of his usual academic contacts had heard from him. I promise. Helena hesitated, then added, I've been practicing something else, too. Something I haven't told you about. Damien raised an eyebrow. What kind of something? Instead of answering, Helena reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden box, a newer, more comfortable version of the one she'd originally kept her garden snake in. She placed it on the table and opened the lid. The little green snake slithered out, but it looked different now. Its scales had the same faint shimmer as the pattern on Helena's arm, and its eyes held an intelligence that no ordinary garden snake could possess. This is Vesper, Helena said. My familiar. Damien stared. You bound a spirit to it? By yourself? Not exactly. Helena stroked the snake's head gently. After what happened with Ophion, I started hearing whispers from the other side more clearly. One voice in particular kept reaching out to me, a woman named Sylvia who died at Ravenscroft 50 years ago. She was a researcher of magical creatures. And you bound her to your snake? Damien looked both impressed and concerned. It was her idea, Helena explained. She said she could help me understand my changing abilities. It's not a full binding, she can come and go from Vesper's form. More like, sharing space. As if responding to her description, Vesper's eyes glowed briefly with an inner light. He's beautiful, Damien said, clearly fascinated. May I? Helena nodded, and Damien carefully extended a hand. Vesper flicked a tongue against his fingers, then allowed Damien to stroke its scales. The shimmer is similar to your arm, he observed. Sylvia says it's the visible sign of spirit binding, one of the core abilities of serpent mediums. Helena watched as Vesper curled contentedly around her wrist. She's been teaching me about the old ways. Turns out, serpent mediums weren't just communicating with the dead. They were forming partnerships with willing spirits, creating a bridge between worlds. That's incredibly advanced magic, Damien said. Most magical historians believed it was impossible without years of training and elaborate rituals. Maybe for most people. But for someone with both Parseltongue and psychic abilities. Helena shrugged. It feels natural, honestly. Like I was always meant to do this. A bell chimed distantly, signaling the approach of dinner. I should go, Helena said, gently returning Vesper to his box. Still have to pack for tomorrow's expedition. I'll walk you back, Damien offered, gathering his notes. They left the observatory together, falling into the easy rhythm they'd developed over the past weeks. What had started as an alliance of necessity had evolved into something more comfortable, friendship, certainly, and perhaps the potential for something deeper. Helena found herself noticing things about Damien she'd overlooked before, the way his eyes lit up when discussing magical theory, how he always listened intently when she described her experiences, the gentle way he'd steadied her during practice sessions when her abilities overwhelmed her. I've been thinking, Damien said as they crossed the courtyard, about what happens after we stop Vane. Bold of you to assume we will, Helena replied, though she appreciated his optimism. We will. His certainty was oddly reassuring. But then what? You'll still have these abilities. They won't just disappear because Vane isn't around to exploit them. Helena had considered this too. I don't know. Keep studying them, I guess. Try to understand what I can actually do with them. You could revolutionize our understanding of death magic, Damien said. Not the dark stuff, the boundary between worlds, communication with those who've passed, preservation of knowledge across generations. If people don't hunt me down first, Helena muttered. Thornwood wasn't wrong about how these abilities are perceived. They reached the dormitory entrance, pausing in the shadow of the archway. Maybe that's exactly why you should develop them, Damien suggested. Change how people see serpent mediums. Show them it doesn't have to be forbidden or dark. Helena looked at him curiously. You really believe that? I do. His expression was earnest. Magic isn't inherently good or evil, it's about intention, about how it's used. What you're doing with Vesper and Sylvia, that's not dark magic. That's something beautiful. Something warm unfurled in Helena's chest at his words. For years, she'd hidden her abilities, ashamed and afraid of how others would react. Damien was the first person who saw them as gifts rather than curses. Thank you, she said softly. For helping me through all this. What are research partners for? He replied with a grin, but his eyes held something more serious. Helena was suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the deepening shadows around them, of the way Damien's gaze dropped briefly to her lips. For a moment, she thought he might, Helena. There you are. They jumped apart as Mina bounded up, her pink hair now sporting electric blue streaks. I've been looking everywhere for you. Did you forget we were supposed to go over the expedition checklist? Mina looked between them, a knowing smile spreading across her face. Oh, sorry. Am I interrupting something? No, Helena said quickly. Damien was just helping me with some research. Research. Mina wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. Well, Mr. Research Fellow, mind if I steal her away? We leave at dawn tomorrow, and unlike some people, I haven't started packing. She's all yours, Damien said, his easy smile hiding any disappointment. Helena, remember what I said about the ruins. Be careful. I will, she promised, before Mina dragged her into the dormitory. Once they were in their room, Mina rounded on her. Spill. Now. What's going on with you two? Nothing, Helena insisted, pulling her travel bag from under the bed. He's helping me with an independent study project. Right. And I'm the Queen of England. Mina flopped onto her bed. You've been sneaking off with him for weeks. People are starting to talk. Helena froze. What people? What are they saying? Relax, it's not bad talk, Mina assured her. Just the usual ooh, she's dating a research fellow, gossip. Actually improved your reputation, if I'm honest. You were getting a bit of a loner weirdo vibe before. Thanks, Helena said dryly, resuming her packing. So? Mina prodded. Is it serious? Has he kissed you yet? Mina. What? Valid questions. Helena threw a rolled-up sock at her roommate. We're friends. Colleagues. That's it. Aha. And that's why you were about to smooch under the archway just now. We were not, Helena sighed, knowing Mina wouldn't let this go. Look, maybe there's something. I don't know. It's complicated. Because of the whole mysterious research thing? Mina asked, suddenly more serious. Something like that. Mina studied her for a moment. You know, you can trust me, right? With whatever's going on. I'm not just a gossip machine. Helena paused in her packing. She did trust Mina, more than most people. But involving her in the situation with Vane could put her in danger. And explaining about being a dual-gifted potential serpent medium was more than Helena was ready to share with anyone besides Damien and the missing Thornwood. I know, Helena said finally. And I promise, when I can explain everything, you'll be the first person I tell. Mina seemed satisfied with that. Deal. Now, about this expedition, are you excited about the Serpent Temple? I heard it's got the best preserved snake carvings in the Western Hemisphere. Serpent Temple. Helena hadn't paid much attention to the expedition itinerary, focusing instead on the opportunity to get away from Vane's watchful eyes. I thought we were just visiting generic ancient ruins. God, you really don't listen in magical history, do you? Mina shook her head in mock disappointment. The whole point of this trip is to study the Temple of Eternal Communion, built by an ancient culture that communicated with their ancestors through serpent rituals. Right up Vane's alley with all her lectures on extinct magical practices. Helena felt a chill. The Temple of Eternal Communion sounded exactly like a place built by or for serpent mediums. And Vane was leading the expedition. She'd assumed the magical creature's professor would be in charge, since it was technically a joint departmental trip. Professor Vane is coming, she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Leading the whole thing, Mina confirmed. Apparently she specialized in ancient death magic practices before becoming a professor. The headmistress announced it today at lunch, which you missed, again. This changed everything. Far from being an escape from Vane's surveillance, the expedition would put Helena directly under her scrutiny in a location specifically connected to serpent mediums. It could be a trap. I need some air, Helena said abruptly, heading for the door. What? We still need to pack. Just 5 minutes. I forgot something. Before Mina could protest further, Helena slipped out of the room and down the corridor. Once out of sight, she broke into a run, heading for the West Tower where Damien had his quarters. She found him in his study, surrounded by books on magical convergence. Helena. He looked up in surprise. What's wrong? The expedition, she gasped, catching her breath. It's to a serpent medium temple. And Vane is leading it. Damien's expression darkened. That can't be coincidence. She must have arranged it after discovering my abilities, Helena said, pacing the small room. It's the perfect opportunity, get me to a location steeped in serpent medium magic, where my abilities will naturally heighten, and then, what? Force the convergence somehow. Take the catalyst. Or both, Damien said grimly. You can't go. I have to, Helena countered. If I back out now, it'll look suspicious. And maybe this is our chance to find out what she's planning. It's too dangerous, Damien insisted. You'd be isolated, surrounded by potential veiled Covenant agents, in a location designed to amplify exactly the kind of magic she wants from you. Not isolated, Helena corrected, an idea forming. 30 students are going, plus 3 professors. And. She hesitated. What if you came too? Damien blinked. Me? How? As a research consultant. Tell the headmistress you're studying ancient convergence chambers for your thesis, and the temple is a perfect example. Helena warmed to the plan. Vane couldn't object without revealing her true intentions. Damien considered this. It could work. The headmistress has been supportive of my research. But Helena, even with me there, it's still risky. Everything about this situation is risky, she pointed out. At least this way, we control some of the variables. After further discussion, they agreed on the plan. Damien would approach the headmistress that evening to request permission to join the expedition as a scholarly observer. Helena would proceed as if everything were normal, keeping her enhanced abilities concealed as much as possible. One more thing, Damien said as Helena prepared to leave. Take this. He handed her a small silver object that resembled a compass. What is it? A panic button, essentially. My advisor sent it ahead. If you're in danger and we're separated, press the center. It'll send out a magical distress signal that only I can track. Helena slipped it into her pocket. Let's hope I don't need it. Let's hope, Damien agreed, though his expression remained worried. The expedition departed at dawn the next morning, a sleepy procession of students boarding the enchanted carriages that would transport them to the remote temple site. Helena was relieved to spot Damien among the faculty group, chatting amiably with Professor Willow. Vane stood slightly apart, her amber eyes scanning the students with calculated interest. You look like you barely slept, Mina commented as they claimed seats in one of the carriages. Just excited, Helena lied, stifling a yawn. In truth, she'd spent most of the night practicing her control exercises, preparing for whatever might happen at the temple. The journey took several hours, carrying them through increasingly wild terrain as they left the civilized area surrounding Ravenscroft. Helena kept Vesper's box carefully stowed in her bag, occasionally checking to ensure the snake was comfortable. The familiar's presence was reassuring, a small ally in what might become a dangerous situation. Finally, the carriages crested a hill, revealing their destination. The Temple of Eternal Communion rose from the forest below, a massive stone structure built into the side of a mountain. Even from a distance, Helena could see the serpentine motifs carved into its walls, the massive snake guardians flanking the entrance. Whoa, Mina breathed beside her. That's impressive. Impressive wasn't the word Helena would have chosen. Powerful. Resonant. The temple called to something deep within her, like a tuning fork vibrating at a frequency only she could hear. The scales on her arm tingled beneath her sleeve. As they descended toward the temple, Professor Vane stood at the front of the lead carriage, addressing the students. The Temple of Eternal Communion represents one of the most sophisticated magical achievements of the pre-modern era, she explained, her voice carrying effortlessly. For centuries, the priests and priestesses who served here maintained contact with their ancestors, preserving knowledge across generations. Their methods were considered revolutionary, and eventually, forbidden. Helena felt Vane's eyes find her as she spoke the last word. A clear message. During our 3 days here, you will document the architectural and magical features of the temple for your respective assignments. Some chambers remain sealed and are strictly off-limits without faculty escort. The consequences of violating this rule will be severe. The carriages came to a stop in a clearing before the temple steps. Students disembarked, chattering excitedly as they collected their bags. Helena hung back, hoping to speak with Damien, but Vane smoothly intercepted her. "Miss Blackwood," the professor said, her voice honey over steel. "I have a special assignment for you." Helena tensed. "What kind of assignment, Professor?" "Given your academic interests, I thought you might benefit from cataloging the serpent symbolism throughout the temple's accessible areas." Vane handed her a leather-bound notebook. "Note the variations in design, the directional orientation of the carvings, and any patterns you observe." It was a reasonable assignment for any student, but Helena understood the subtext. Vane was ensuring she would interact with every serpent symbol in the temple, potentially triggering her abilities in predictable ways that Vane could observe. "Thank you, Professor," Helena said neutrally, accepting the notebook. "I'll be thorough." "I'm sure you will." Vane's amber eyes studied her arm where the scales lay hidden beneath her sleeve. The temple has a way of bringing out hidden qualities in those receptive to its energy. Before Helena could respond, Damien approached them, his expression professionally curious. "Professor Vane, I was hoping to discuss the convergence architecture of the central chamber. Historical records suggest it was designed to combine elemental magics in a rather unique fashion." Vane's attention shifted to Damien, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. "Mr. Frost. While I appreciate your scholarly interest, perhaps we should allow the students to settle in before diving into advanced architectural theory." "Of course," Damien agreed easily. "Later, then." Vane moved away to organize the other students, and Damien leaned closer to Helena. "Special assignment," he murmured. "She wants me to catalog every snake carving in the temple," Helena replied quietly. "Predictable. She's testing your sensitivity to the symbols." Damien frowned. "Be careful not to linger too long with any particular carving. If you feel your abilities activating, move away immediately." "Got it. What about you? Any luck getting access to the restricted areas?" "Not yet. Vane's keeping the sealed chambers under tight control." Damien's expression turned thoughtful. "But there might be another way in. Meet me at the eastern side of the temple after dinner. There's something I want to check." They separated as Professor Willow called for students to gather their belongings and follow her to the camping area. The expedition would be staying in enchanted tents set up within the temple's outer courtyard, comfortable enough, but still a reminder that they were far from the safety of Ravenscroft. The afternoon was spent on preliminary explorations of the temple's main halls. Helena dutifully sketched serpent carvings in Vane's notebook, but kept her interactions brief, moving quickly from one to the next. Even so, she could feel her abilities responding to the ancient magic that saturated the temple. The whispers of the dead grew louder, more coherent, and her Parseltongue sensitivity heightened until even the carved snake seemed to hiss faintly under her gaze. Vesper grew increasingly active in his box, responding to the magical energy. During a private moment in one of the lesser-used corridors, Helena let him out briefly. "Many spirits here," the snake hissed, his body practically vibrating with excitement. "Old ones. Powerful ones. Can Sylvia sense them too?" Helena asked in Parseltongue. Vesper's eyes glowed briefly as the bound spirit of Sylvia took more active control. "Yes," the snake replied, its voice taking on a more refined quality. "They're curious about you, Helena. Word has spread among the dead that a new serpent medium walks among the living. That was unsettling. What do they want from me? Different things. Some wish to be heard. Others to teach. A few." Vesper paused, "A few would use you as a conduit back to the living world. Be cautious with those. They hunger for physical form again." Like Ophion, Helena realized. Yes, though he was particularly dangerous, a former high priest who considered himself a god. Most spirits are less ambitious. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, forcing Helena to quickly return Vesper to his box. A moment later, a girl from her magical theory class appeared, Sarah Maxwell, a quiet student known for her brilliant analytical mind. "Oh, Helena," Sarah said, seemingly surprised to find someone else in the corridor. "Find anything interesting for Vane's assignment?" "Just more snake carvings," Helena replied, holding up her notebook as evidence. "You?" "I'm tracking magical residue patterns," Sarah explained, showing a device that resembled a cross between a compass and a thermometer. "This place is off the charts. Some of the readings don't even make sense according to modern magical theory." Helena had never spoken much with Sarah before, despite sharing several classes. The girl kept to herself, much as Helena did. "What kind of inconsistencies?" Helena asked, genuinely curious. "Magical energy doesn't flow in the expected patterns here. It's like..." Sarah searched for the right words, like the temple was designed to create specific magical resonances between different points. "See?" She showed Helena the device's reading, which displayed a complex waveform. "These peaks should cancel each other out according to standard magical field theory. But instead, they're amplifying each other." "Convergence architecture," Helena murmured, remembering Damien's words. "Exactly." Sarah looked impressed. "You know about that?" "A little. I've been researching it recently." "Same. It's fascinating how the ancients understood certain magical principles that we're only rediscovering now." Sarah adjusted her device. "I'm hoping to map the entire resonance pattern before we leave. Want to help? 2 people could cover more ground." The offer was tempting. Sarah's device might reveal information about the temple's magical structure that could help Helena understand how it might affect her abilities. But something held her back, caution born from weeks of watching Vane's manipulations. "Maybe later," Helena suggested. "I should finish this assignment first." "Sure, no rush. I'll be around." Sarah smiled and continued down the corridor, her device beeping softly. Helena watched her go, uncertain why she felt uneasy. Sarah seemed genuine enough, and her interest in the temple's magical properties made perfect sense for a top student. Perhaps Helena was becoming paranoid, seeing potential threats everywhere after weeks of tension. Dinner that evening was a communal affair in the temple courtyard. Students and faculty gathered around enchanted fire pits that provided both warmth and cooking heat without smoke. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost festive, with excited discussions of the day's discoveries. Helena ate quickly, keeping an eye on the setting sun. She needed to meet Damien at the eastern side of the temple soon. As she was finishing her meal, Professor Vane appeared beside her. "How is your cataloging progressing, Miss Blackwood?" the professor asked, her tone conversational but her eyes sharp. "Well enough," Helena replied, showing the notebook filled with sketches. "The variety is impressive." "Indeed." Vane took the notebook, flipping through the pages with obvious interest. "You have a good eye for detail. Have you noticed any unusual sensations while working with the carvings?" The question was too pointed to be innocent. "Unusual? No. Should I have?" "Some students report feeling the temple's magical resonance more strongly than others," Vane said smoothly. "Those with particular sensitivities often experience enhanced awareness here." She was fishing, trying to determine if Helena's abilities had responded to the temple. Helena kept her expression neutral. "I'll let you know if I experience anything noteworthy, Professor." "Please do." Vane returned the notebook. "I've arranged for a special tour of one of the sealed chambers tomorrow morning. For advanced students only. I'd like you to join us." That set alarm bells ringing in Helena's mind. "I'd be honored, Professor." "Excellent. After breakfast, then." Vane moved away to speak with other students. Helena waited a few minutes before slipping away from the gathering, using the excuse of retrieving something from her tent. Once out of sight, she circled around to the eastern side of the temple where deep shadows had already gathered in the failing light. Damien was waiting as promised, examining what appeared to be an ordinary section of the temple's outer wall. "There you are," he said when Helena appeared. "Find anything interesting today? Besides Vane inviting me to a special tour of a sealed chamber tomorrow?" "Not much." Helena glanced at the wall he was studying. "What's this?" "Possibly a hidden entrance. Look." Damien traced what seemed like random weathering patterns in the stonework. "These aren't random damage, they're disguised serpent forms. 7 of them, arranged in a specific pattern." Now that he pointed it out, Helena could see it, subtle snake shapes integrated into the wall's texture, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. "A password system," she guessed. "I think so. Historical accounts mention priests using the 7 sacred serpents to access private chambers." Damien looked at her expectantly. "This might respond to Parseltongue." Helena glanced around nervously. "What if Vane is watching?" "I've been checking this spot since we arrived. It's in a blind spot from both the main entrance and the faculty tents. And I set up a minor confusion ward. Anyone approaching will suddenly remember an urgent task elsewhere." Impressed with his thoroughness, Helena turned to the disguised snake carvings. She placed her hand on the central one and focused, allowing her Parseltongue ability to flow while keeping the psychic aspects carefully contained. "Open to the worthy," she hissed experimentally. Nothing happened. "Reveal your secrets," she tried. Still nothing. "Maybe it needs a specific phrase," Damien suggested. Helena considered the arrangement of the snake forms, a circle with one snake in the center. It reminded her of something from Thornwood's book on serpent mediums. 7 guardians of wisdom, 1 seeker of truth," she hissed, recalling the ritual phrase. The stone beneath her palm warmed slightly, but the wall remained solid. "It responded," she told Damien. "But that's not quite right either." Helena removed Vesper from her bag, allowing the snake to examine the carvings. "Can you feel anything from these?" she asked. Vesper's tongue flicked against the stone. "Old magic. Waiting. Needs blood and voice together." "Blood again," Helena muttered. "Why is it always blood?" "What did it say?" Damien asked. "The lock needs both Parseltongue and blood to activate." Helena frowned. Blood seems to be a recurring theme with serpent medium magic. It's one of the most magically potent substances, Damien explained. And it contains the essence of the caster, their magical signature, so to speak. For highly personalized magic like communicating with the dead, it makes a certain sense. Helena looked at the carved snakes dubiously. So I just bleed on it and speak the phrase. A small amount should suffice, Damien said, though he looked concerned. But Helena, are you sure? Blood magic is serious business. We need to know what's in there, she said firmly. Especially if Vane is planning to take me into a sealed chamber tomorrow. Decision made, Helena used her wand to make a tiny cut on her fingertip. She pressed the bleeding finger to the central snake carving and repeated the phrase. 7 guardians of wisdom, 1 seeker of truth. This time, the response was immediate. The snake carvings all began to glow with a soft golden light, and the stone beneath her hand seemed to melt away, revealing a narrow passage beyond. It worked. Damien whispered, excitement overriding caution. The passage was dark, but Helena could see it extended about 10 feet before turning sharply. Damien produced a small magical light, and they entered cautiously, the wall reforming behind them. The temperature dropped noticeably as they proceeded, their breath forming small clouds in the air. The passage made several turns before opening into a small chamber that took Helena's breath away. Unlike the main temple halls with their imposing architecture, this room was intimate, clearly designed for use by 1 or 2 people at most. The walls were covered not with carvings but with writings, thousands of tiny, precise symbols that seemed to shift and change as they watched. What is this place? Helena whispered, her voice instinctively hushed. A record-keeping chamber, I think, Damien said, examining the walls. These look like chronicles of some kind. In the center of the room stood a simple stone pedestal supporting a basin filled with what appeared to be quicksilver. As Helena approached, the liquid surface rippled as if disturbed by an unseen wind. Look at this, she called softly to Damien. It's responding to my presence. Damien joined her by the basin. Some kind of memory pool, maybe. Similar to a pensieve, but more primitive. Helena reached out cautiously, her fingers hovering above the silvery surface. The liquid rose to meet her, forming a small, shimmering tendril. It wants me to touch it, she realized. Helena, wait, but her fingers had already made contact with the quicksilver. Instantly, the world around her dissolved into swirling mist. When it cleared, Helena found herself still in the chamber, but transformed, the walls now bright with fresh paint, the air warmer, and the basin glowing with internal light. A woman stood opposite her, dressed in elaborate robes adorned with serpent symbols. Her ageless face was marked with ritual scars that formed scale-like patterns around her eyes. You have come at last, the woman said, her lips moving in an ancient language that Helena somehow understood perfectly. I am Nephthys, High Priestess of the Eternal Communion. Helena tried to respond but found she couldn't speak. This wasn't a true projection into the past, then, but a recorded message designed to activate when touched by someone with the right magical signature. If you are witnessing this memory, you bear the dual gift, the serpent's tongue and the seer's eye, Nephthys continued. You have begun the convergence, but remain untrained in our ways. The priestess moved around the basin, her movements fluid and precise. I leave this record in the time of great persecution, when our order faces extinction. Those who fear our communion with the ancestors hunt us like animals, destroying our temples, burning our records. Nephthys' expression hardened. But they cannot destroy the knowledge itself, for it resides in the realm beyond death, accessible to those with the gifts. She gestured to the walls, where Helena now recognized the shifting symbols as a written form of Parseltongue. Here are recorded the basic rituals of our order, how to speak with the worthy dead, how to bind willing spirits as guides and guardians, how to channel their knowledge without surrendering your will. Nephthys approached Helena, studying her with penetrating eyes. But beware the final convergence without proper training. When the serpent and seer become one, power flows that can corrupt as easily as illuminate. The priestess held out her hand, revealing a green stone identical to the catalyst Helena had seen Vane place on the altar in the serpent room. The serpent's eye controls the flow of power during convergence. Without it, the process becomes chaotic, painful, potentially fatal. With it, precision is possible, allowing for full mastery of the converged abilities. Helena felt a chill despite the chamber's warmth. This confirmed what Damien had theorized: an uncontrolled convergence could kill her. Learn our ways, Nephthys urged. Master the separate gifts before attempting their union. And above all, remember the sacred covenant: spirits must come willingly, never compelled. To force communion is to corrupt the very magic that defines us. The priestess began to fade, the chamber dimming around her. One final warning, her voice echoed. Those who seek our power without our ethics still walk the world. They call themselves the keepers of the veil now, but I have seen their hearts. They desire control, not communion. They would use the dead as tools, not honor them as teachers. The veiled covenant, Helena realized. They had existed even in Nephthys' time, under a different name. The eye has been hidden where only a true medium can find it. Seek the chamber of first communion, beyond the 7 trials of worthiness. There you will. The vision cut off abruptly as Helena felt herself being yanked backward. The mist swirled again, and suddenly she was back in the cold, dark chamber, Damien gripping her shoulders. Helena! Can you hear me? His face was tight with worry. I'm fine, she gasped, still disoriented from the abrupt transition. Why did you pull me out? You were starting to fade, literally becoming transparent. Whatever that thing is, it was pulling you in. Damien's concern was evident. What happened? What did you see? Helena described her vision of Nephthys and the priestess's warnings about uncontrolled convergence and the veiled covenant. So Vane's group has been hunting serpent mediums for centuries, Damien concluded. First as the keepers of the veil, now as the veiled covenant. And they need the serpent's eye, the catalyst, to safely control the convergence process. Helena looked back at the quicksilver basin, now still and dull. Nephthys said it was hidden in the chamber of first communion, beyond 7 trials. That must be what Vane is really after, Damien reasoned. She's not just interested in your abilities, she wants to find the eye. And she thinks I can lead her to it. Helena felt sick. That's why she invited me to the special tour, tomorrow. She's going to use me to locate this chamber of first communion. A faint sound from the passage made them both freeze. Footsteps, approaching rapidly. Someone found us, Damien whispered, drawing his wand. Get behind me. Helena moved to comply, but as she stepped away from the basin, her sleeve caught on the pedestal's edge. The fabric pulled up, revealing the scale pattern that now covered most of her forearm. The scales began to glow in response to the chamber's ancient magic, emitting a soft green light. Helena, your arm. Before she could respond, the passage entrance opened, and a figure entered the chamber. To their surprise, it wasn't Vane but Sarah Maxwell, her analytical device beeping frantically in her hand. I knew it. Sarah exclaimed, eyes wide as she took in the scene, especially Helena's glowing arm. You are a dual-gifted. The resonance patterns around you have been driving my readings crazy all day. Sarah, Helena said carefully, pulling her sleeve down. What are you doing here? Following the strongest convergence point in the entire temple, Sarah replied, holding up her device. It led me straight to this hidden chamber, and to you. Her gaze was intense, almost hungry. Do you realize how rare your abilities are? How valuable? Something in her tone made Helena uneasy. How did you get through the blood lock? A flicker of something, satisfaction, crossed Sarah's face. I have my methods. More importantly, I know what you are, Helena. A potential serpent medium. The first in generations. And how exactly do you know about serpent mediums? Damien asked, his wand still raised. Research, of course. The same as you, I imagine, Mr. Frost. Sarah stepped further into the chamber, seemingly unconcerned by Damien's defensive posture. Though my interest is more personal than academic. Personal how? Helena asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Sarah smiled, and in that moment, she looked remarkably like Professor Vane, the same predatory intensity in her eyes. My mother was the last known dual-gifted before you, Helena. Though her convergence was incomplete. Unstable. Sarah's expression darkened momentarily. It drove her mad, in the end. Because she lacked the proper guidance. The proper tools. The serpent's eye, Helena whispered. Precisely. Sarah looked delighted. You really have been doing your research. Yes, without the eye, convergence is a death sentence. Or worse than death, a half-life of uncontrolled power and fractured consciousness. And let me guess, Damien said coldly. You're here to help Helena avoid that fate. Out of the goodness of your heart. I'm here because our interests align, Sarah countered. Helena needs the eye to survive her convergence. I want to study a successful convergence, the first in centuries. Professor Vane wants to control serpent medium magic for the Covenant's purposes. Two of these goals are compatible. One is not. Helena's mind raced. Was Sarah offering an alliance against Vane? Or setting a more subtle trap? If you're not with Vane, why are you here on this expedition? Helena challenged. Seems convenient. I enrolled at Ravenscroft 3 years ago specifically to watch for signs of dual-gifted students, Sarah admitted candidly. When Vane arrived and started paying special attention to you, I knew I'd found what I was looking for. You've been watching me for weeks, Helena realized. Months, actually. You're quite good at hiding your abilities, but there were indicators. Books you checked out. Reactions to certain magical stimuli in class. Nothing definitive until recently. Sarah glanced at Helena's concealed arm. The marking is new, isn't it? Started after some kind of triggering event. Helena exchanged a look with Damien, who gave a slight nod. They needed information, and Sarah seemed willing to provide it, at least for now. About 3 weeks ago, Helena confirmed. In a hidden chamber beneath Ravenscroft. Something called itself Ophion and tried to force a convergence. Ophion? Sarah's eyes widened. The first priest. That's unexpected. And concerning. His methods were notoriously aggressive. She studied Helena with renewed interest. Yet you resisted him. Impressive. Why should we trust you? Damien asked bluntly. You admit to spying on Helena for months. Observing, not spying, Sarah corrected. And you should trust me because I'm telling you things Vane never would. Like the fact that she plans to use Helena to find the eye, then force a controlled convergence using blood ritual magic that will bind Helena's abilities to the Covenant's service. How do you know that? Helena demanded. Because it's exactly what they tried to do to my mother. Sarah's voice hardened. Before it went catastrophically wrong. A distant noise, voices calling through the temple, interrupted them. Search parties, Damien guessed. We've been gone too long. We need to get back before we're missed, Helena agreed. Before you go, Sarah said quickly, a warning. Vane's special tour, tomorrow. It's to the purification chamber, a room specifically designed to enhance spiritual sensitivity. She's going to use it to accelerate your convergence, make you more receptive to the eye's location. Why are you telling us this? Helena asked suspiciously. Because uncontrolled acceleration is dangerous. It could trigger a premature convergence. Sarah reached into her pocket and withdrew a small vial of clear liquid. Take this before you go. It will temporarily suppress your psychic abilities, making the chamber's effects less overwhelming. Helena made no move to accept the vial. And I should trust this because if you die from a botched convergence, none of us gets what we want. Sarah placed the vial on top of the pedestal. Your choice. But I'd rather work with you willingly than watch Vane force you into compliance. With that, Sarah turned and left the chamber, the sound of her footsteps fading down the passage. Well, that was unexpected, Damien said once they were alone again. Do you believe her? Helena asked, eyeing the vial Sarah had left. Not entirely. But her warning about the purification chamber makes sense. It would be the perfect place to manipulate your abilities. Damien picked up the vial, examining it carefully. I can test this before tomorrow. See if it's what she claims. And if it is, then maybe we use it. Or maybe we find a way to avoid this special tour altogether. Helena shook her head. Backing out would only make Vane more suspicious. At least now we know what she's planning. They carefully retraced their steps to the hidden entrance. Before leaving, Helena took one last look at the quicksilver basin, wishing she could have heard the rest of Nephthys' message. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Helena had slept poorly, her dreams filled with serpents and whispers from the dead. The scale pattern had spread during the night, now reaching her shoulder and beginning to creep across her collarbone. The convergence was accelerating, just as Sarah had warned. Damien caught her eye at breakfast, giving a subtle nod. He'd tested Sarah's vial and found it to be exactly what she'd claimed, a psychic suppression elixir, commonly used by those with uncontrolled sensitivity. Helena had taken half the dose before coming to breakfast, enough to dampen her abilities without eliminating them entirely. Professor Vane approached as the meal concluded, looking perfectly composed in formal academic robes. Miss Blackwood, are you ready for our special tour? She asked, her amber eyes sharp despite her pleasant tone. Yes, Professor, Helena replied, keeping her expression neutral. What should I expect to see in this sealed chamber? The purification chamber was where initiates prepared for communion with ancestor spirits, Vane explained, leading Helena away from the main group. Its walls are lined with a rare crystal that enhances spiritual receptivity. Quite fascinating from an academic perspective. And quite useful for someone wanting to manipulate a developing serpent medium, Helena thought. Will other students be joining us? She asked casually. A small group. Those with the appropriate sensitivity to appreciate the chamber's unique properties. They reached a smaller courtyard where 5 other students waited, all top performers from various classes, including Sarah, who gave Helena a barely perceptible nod. Mr. Frost will be accompanying us as well, Vane added, a hint of irritation in her voice as Damien approached the group. For his research on convergence architecture. Thank you for allowing me to observe, Professor, Damien said politely. Historical accounts of the purification chamber are quite limited. Vane led them deeper into the temple, past the areas open to the general expedition and down a narrow corridor guarded by faculty assistants. Helena recognized them as graduate students who often worked with Vane, now clearly revealed as Covenant members. The corridor ended at a massive stone door carved with intricate serpent designs. Unlike the hidden entrance Helena and Damien had discovered the night before, this one required no blood or Parseltongue to open, just an elaborate key that Vane produced from within her robes. The chamber beyond is perfectly safe, Vane assured the group as she unlocked the door, but those with particular sensitivities may experience unusual sensations. This is normal and temporary. The door swung open to reveal a circular room that immediately reminded Helena of the serpent room beneath Ravenscroft, though much larger and more elaborately decorated. The walls were indeed lined with crystals, clear stones that seemed to capture and amplify the magical light Vane conjured. As they entered, Helena felt a subtle pressure against her psychic barriers, like water testing a dam for weaknesses. Without Sarah's elixir, she suspected the sensation would have been overwhelming, possibly triggering exactly the accelerated convergence Vane wanted. Note the symmetrical arrangement of the crystals, Vane was saying to the group. They're aligned with specific magical meridians to enhance spiritual energy flow. While the other students dutifully took notes, Helena noticed Sarah moving systematically around the chamber with her resonance device partially concealed in her palm. Damien, meanwhile, had positioned himself near the door, occasionally glancing at a small object in his hand that Helena recognized as a protective charm, likely ready to intervene if anything went wrong. "Miss Blackwood," Vane called, gesturing her to the center of the chamber. "Perhaps you could give us your impression of the room's energy? Given your academic focus on rare magical phenomena." It was a trap, designed to place Helena at the focal point of the crystal array. But refusing would only confirm Vane's suspicions about her knowledge. "Of course, Professor," Helena said, moving to the indicated spot. The pressure increased immediately, pushing more insistently against her suppressed abilities. She could feel the convergence responding, the scales under her clothing warming uncomfortably. "What do you sense?" Vane asked, watching her intently. "A certain resonance," Helena replied carefully. "Like the room is designed to amplify something." "Very good. And if you focus on that resonance?" Vane moved closer, her voice dropping so only Helena could hear. "Perhaps you might glimpse what lies beyond the veil. Voices calling from the other side, perhaps." The direct reference to her abilities was startling. Vane was being far less subtle than before, perhaps empowered by their isolation in this ancient place. "I'm not sure what you mean, Professor," Helena replied, feigning confusion. Vane's expression hardened slightly. "I think you do, Miss Blackwood. Or should I call you by your proper title? Serpent Medium." The other students were absorbed in examining the crystals, out of earshot. Only Damien and Sarah seemed to notice the tension between Helena and Vane. "I don't know what you're talking about," Helena insisted, though her heart raced. "The scales on your arms suggest otherwise," Vane said softly. "Oh yes, I've noticed. The convergence is already well underway. But without proper guidance, without the right tools, it will destroy you. Just as it destroyed the last girl who tried to master these abilities without help." "Sarah's mother," Helena whispered. Something flashed in Vane's eyes, surprise, quickly masked. "You've been speaking to Miss Maxwell. Interesting. Did she tell you how her mother died? How her mind fractured under the pressure of uncontrolled convergence? How she begged the Covenant for help in her final, lucid moments?" "She said you tried to bind her mother to your service," Helena countered. "We tried to save her," Vane corrected. "The binding ritual would have stabilized her abilities, given her purpose and structure. But she was too far gone." The professor's voice softened, almost sympathetic. "You're not too far gone, Helena. Not yet. But soon, the convergence will reach a critical point. When it does, you'll need the serpent's eye. And you have it?" "Not yet. But you can help me find it." Vane gestured around the chamber. This room was designed to enhance the connection between serpent mediums and their ancestors. If you open yourself to it fully, the location of the eye will be revealed to you. "And then what?" "You use it to bind me to the Covenant. Force me to use my abilities for your purposes." "I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement," Vane said smoothly. "You gain control over your dangerous abilities. We gain access to knowledge long lost to the world." Before Helena could respond, a commotion erupted near the chamber entrance. One of the other students had collapsed, apparently overwhelmed by the room's energy. "Professor!" Damien called, already moving to assist. "Something's wrong." Vane was forced to break away from Helena to address the situation. As she did, Sarah quickly took her place. "The chamber's affecting everyone, not just you," Sarah whispered urgently. Vane miscalculated its potency after centuries of magical buildup. "Or she didn't care who else got hurt," Helena replied bitterly. "We need to leave. Now." Before, a deep rumbling interrupted her as the crystals in the walls began to glow with increasing intensity. The magical pressure in the room doubled, then tripled, as some ancient mechanism activated. "What's happening?" one of the students cried in alarm. The chamber is awakening, Vane announced, her voice rising with excitement rather than concern. Everyone remained calm. This is a rare opportunity to observe. Her instructions were cut short as several crystals shattered explosively, sending razor-sharp shards flying across the room. Students screamed, diving for cover. Helena felt a sharp pain as a fragment sliced her cheek, drawing blood. The moment her blood hit the chamber floor, the remaining crystals pulsed with blinding light. The convergence inside Helena surged in response, overwhelming the suppression elixir. Voices of the dead flooded her mind, hundreds of them speaking simultaneously in ancient tongues. Helena. Damien fought his way to her side as the chamber descended into chaos. We need to get out. But Helena couldn't move. The voices were too loud, too insistent. Among them, one rose above the others, Nephthys, the high priestess from her vision. The eye lies beneath the altar of 7 serpents, in the chamber of First Communion. Seek the eastern path, beyond the guardian. Only blood of the gifted will reveal the way. She's telling me where to find the eye, Helena gasped, barely aware she was speaking aloud. Vane's head snapped toward her, amber eyes gleaming with triumph despite the chaos. Where? Tell me where. Before Helena could respond, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. Cracks spread across the chamber floor, and sections began to collapse into some space below. Everyone out. Damien shouted, pulling Helena toward the door. The students needed no further encouragement, fleeing in panic as the ancient chamber began to disintegrate. Helena stumbled, her senses still overwhelmed by psychic input. Damien half-carried her toward the exit, with Sarah surprisingly moving to help on her other side. The eastern path, Vane was saying to her assistants as they retreated. Secure it immediately. Find the altar of 7 serpents. They barely made it out before the chamber's entrance collapsed, sealing it behind them in a cloud of dust and debris. The corridor filled with coughing students and faculty as those who had been inside the purification chamber emerged into relative safety. What happened in there? Professor Willow demanded, hurrying toward them with other faculty members in tow. An unforeseen magical discharge, Vane replied smoothly, quickly composing herself. The chamber's ancient systems were more volatile than historical records indicated. Fortunately, everyone appears to have escaped. While Vane dealt with the other professors, Damien and Sarah helped Helena to a quiet alcove away from the commotion. Are you all right? Damien asked, examining the cut on her cheek. No, Helena admitted, her voice shaking. The voices, they're still here. Quieter, but not gone. She looked at Sarah. Your elixir failed. It didn't fail. It was overwhelmed, Sarah corrected. The chamber was never supposed to activate like that. Something triggered its full power, probably your blood contacting the floor. Nephthys spoke to me, Helena told them. She told me where to find the eye. We heard, Damien said grimly. And so did Vane. She's already sent people to secure the eastern path, Sarah confirmed. Whatever this altar of 7 serpents is, they'll find it before we do. Helena touched her wounded cheek, her fingers coming away red with blood. Maybe not. Nephthys said, only blood of the gifted will reveal the way. If that means serpent medium blood, Vane's people won't be able to access it. But Vane could force you to open it for her, Damien pointed out. Not if we find it first. Helena stood, steadier now as the psychic overload gradually subsided. We need to locate this eastern path before they do. I know where it is, Sarah said unexpectedly. My resonance mapping yesterday showed a major energy pathway leading east from the main temple complex. It wasn't accessible from any of the public areas, but there might be another hidden entrance. Like the one we found yesterday, Helena realized. Can you show us? Sarah nodded. Once things calm down. But we need to be careful, Vane will be watching you closely now. As if summoned by her name, Professor Vane appeared at the entrance to their alcove. "Miss Blackwood," she said, her tone concerned but her eyes calculating. "Are you injured? That cut looks painful." "I'm fine, Professor," Helena replied, fighting the urge to step back. "Just a scratch. Nevertheless, you should have it treated properly. Magic-infused crystal can cause complications if left unattended." Vane turned to Damien and Sarah. "Thank you for assisting my student. I'll take her to the medical tent now." It wasn't a request. Vane clearly intended to separate Helena from her allies. "Actually, Professor," Damien interjected, "as the headmistress's appointed safety observer for this expedition, I should document Miss Blackwood's injury for the incident report." Vane's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course. The report. How conscientious of you, Mr. Frost. Perhaps you could meet us at the medical tent in, say, 30 minutes. Once the initial treatment is complete." Before Damien could object further, one of Vane's graduate assistants appeared. "Professor, urgent message from the headmistress," the assistant said, handing Vane a sealed note. Vane opened it, her expression darkening as she read. "It seems today's excitement has attracted unwanted attention. The Magical Archaeological Preservation Society has been notified of an incident at the temple and is sending representatives immediately." She looked at Helena with barely concealed frustration. "We'll continue our conversation later, Miss Blackwood. For now, please have that cut treated." With that, she swept away, already dictating instructions to her assistant. "That was close," Sarah murmured once Vane was out of earshot. "Who contacted the Preservation Society?" Helena wondered. Damien smiled slightly. "I might have sent an emergency alert when the chamber started collapsing. They have authority over all magical archaeological sites, even Vane has to defer to them." "Clever," Sarah acknowledged. "That should keep her busy for a while. Enough time for us to find this eastern path." "Not us," Helena decided. "Just me and Damien. No offense, Sarah, but I'm still not sure whose side you're on." Sarah didn't seem offended. "Fair enough. But you'll need this." She handed Helena her resonance device. "It's calibrated to detect the specific magical frequency of the temple's hidden pathways. Follow the strongest reading eastward." Helena accepted the device cautiously. "Why help us if you're not coming?" "Because someone needs to distract Vane," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "I'll feed her misleading information about where you might have gone. Buy you some time." "That's dangerous," Damien warned. "If she realizes you're working against her." "She won't," Sarah said confidently. "Vane thinks I'm just like her, willing to use anyone to get what I want. She'll believe I'm playing both sides for my own benefit." "Aren't you?" Helena asked bluntly. Sarah smiled enigmatically. "Get going. The eastern section is less patrolled since most of the expedition activities are focused on the main temple areas." Once Sarah had left to play her part in the distraction, Helena and Damien made their way cautiously through the temple complex. The resonance device led them to a less restored section, where crumbling walls and overgrown passages made travel difficult but provided excellent cover. "The signal's getting stronger," Helena whispered, watching the device's readings climb. "Whatever we're looking for should be." She stopped abruptly as they rounded a corner and found themselves facing a massive stone carving of a coiled serpent. Unlike the decorative snake motifs throughout the temple, this one was clearly a guardian figure, its stone eyes inlaid with the same type of crystals that had lined the purification chamber. "The guardian Nephthys mentioned," Damien murmured. Helena approached the carving carefully. The resonance device was now emitting a steady tone, indicating they'd reached their destination. But there was no obvious passage or doorway, just the imposing serpent carving set into what appeared to be a solid wall. "Blood of the gifted will reveal the way," Helena recalled. The cut on her cheek had stopped bleeding, so she used her wand to reopen it slightly, then pressed her bloodied fingers to the serpent's forehead. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystal eyes began to glow, and a seam appeared in the wall beside the carving, widening into an archway. It worked! Damien exclaimed softly. Beyond the archway lay a narrow passage sloping downward into darkness. Helena produced a magical light, revealing rough stone steps descending deep beneath the temple complex. The chamber of First Communion must be underground, she reasoned as they began their descent. The passage twisted and turned, leading them ever deeper. Helena could feel the magic growing stronger with each step, resonating with her partially converged abilities. The voices of the dead grew louder again, though less chaotic than in the purification chamber. These were focused, purposeful whispers, guiding rather than overwhelming. Finally, the passage opened into a breathtaking space, a massive natural cavern transformed into a sacred chamber. Stalactites hung from the distant ceiling like stone serpents, while the floor was inlaid with a mosaic depicting the communion between the living and the dead, connected by serpentine forms. At the far end stood a circular altar supported by 7 stone serpents, their bodies twisted together in an elaborate knot. "The altar of 7 serpents," Helena whispered. They approached cautiously, aware they had limited time before Vane figured out where they'd gone. The altar's surface was bare except for a shallow depression in its center, a perfect fit for the serpent's eye, Helena realized. Nephthys said the eye is beneath the altar, Damien recalled. But I don't see any way to access it. Helena examined the 7 serpent supports. Each had a small, almost imperceptible indentation on its head, similar to where she had placed her blood on the guardian carving. "I think I need to activate all 7, she said, touching her still bloodied fingers to the first serpent's head. The stone immediately began to glow with a soft green light. Helena moved around the altar, pressing her blood to each serpent in turn. As the 7th activated, a low rumbling filled the chamber, and the altar's top slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside lay a small object wrapped in ancient cloth. With trembling fingers, Helena unwrapped it, revealing a green crystal eye identical to the catalyst Vane had shown them in the serpent room. "The serpent's eye," Damien breathed. "You found it." As Helena lifted the artifact, it began to pulse with inner light, responding to her touch. The scale pattern on her arm glowed in response, sending a wave of warmth through her body. "It recognizes me," she said in wonder. "As it should." A cold voice echoed through the chamber. "But it's not meant for you alone." They spun to find Lilith Vane standing at the chamber entrance, flanked by her 2 graduate assistants with wands drawn. Behind them, looking apologetic but resolute, stood Sarah. "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "They followed me. I couldn't shake them." "You never intended to," Helena realized bitterly. "This was your plan all along." "Not exactly," Sarah replied. "I did try to help you." But Professor Vane made a compelling counterargument. She glanced at one of the assistants, who Helena now noticed was holding a wand directly to Sarah's back. "Miss Maxwell has a regrettable independent streak," Vane said, stepping forward. "But she ultimately understands where her best interests lie." Her amber gaze fixed on the eye in Helena's hand. "As should you, Miss Blackwood." "Stay back," Helena warned, clutching the artifact tightly. "Or what?" Vane smiled coldly. "You'll use the eye against me? You don't even know how it functions. In untrained hands, it's as likely to kill you as help you." "Then explain it to me," Helena challenged, buying time as Damien subtly shifted into a defensive position beside her. "What does the Veiled Covenant want with serpent medium magic? What any scholar wants with lost knowledge, to restore it, to understand it, to use it for the betterment of magical society." Vane took another step forward. "The Covenant has safeguarded magical secrets for centuries, preserving what others would destroy out of fear and ignorance. By forcing practitioners to serve you," Helena countered. "By binding them against their will. Some restrictions are necessary when dealing with potentially dangerous arts," Vane replied smoothly. "But we're not the monsters history has painted us to be. The original serpent mediums were arrogant, reckless. They communed with any spirit that answered their call, without considering the consequences. And you're different. We're disciplined. Selective. We understand that some doors between worlds should remain closed, while others can be opened under controlled conditions. Vane held out her hand. The eye, Helena. Give it to me, and I'll show you how to control the convergence properly. Without pain, without the risk of madness that claimed Sarah's mother. Helena hesitated, feeling the eye pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Part of her, the part terrified of the accelerating convergence, was tempted by Vane's offer. Don't listen to her, Damien urged quietly. Remember what Nephthys said. The Covenant wants to control, not commune. Mr. Frost, Vane said coldly, always so quick to judge what you don't understand. The Covenant has preserved more magical knowledge than Ravenscroft Academy has accumulated in its entire history. We seek balance, not domination. Is that why you kidnapped Professor Thornwood? Helena demanded. For balance. Something flickered in Vane's eyes. Elias made his choice when he interfered with Covenant business. He'll be released when our work here is complete. So he is alive, Damien said, relief evident in his voice. For now. Vane's patience was clearly wearing thin. Enough talk. The eye, Helena. You can give it willingly, or we can take it. The choice determines how painful this becomes. Helena looked down at the artifact glowing in her palm, then at the scales spreading across her arm. The convergence was progressing whether she wanted it or not. Without proper control, it would eventually overwhelm her, just as it had Sarah's mother. But surrendering to the Covenant meant losing her autonomy, becoming a tool for their purposes. Neither option seemed acceptable. As if sensing her thoughts, the eye pulsed brighter, and Helena felt a subtle communication, not words exactly, but impressions. The artifact itself seemed to be offering a third option. I choose neither, Helena said firmly, closing her fingers around the eye. Neither uncontrolled convergence nor Covenant control. Before anyone could react, she pressed the eye directly against the scales on her arm. The contact triggered an immediate reaction. The green light from the artifact flowed into the scales, which absorbed it like water into parched earth. The sensation was intense but not painful, more like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. No! Vane cried, lunging forward. But she was too late. The eye's light had fully transferred into Helena's arm, leaving the crystal itself dull and apparently powerless in her hand. The scale pattern now glowed with the same inner light that had filled the artifact, spreading rapidly across her body. What have you done? Vane demanded, stopping short as the magical energy radiating from Helena became palpable in the chamber. What Nephthys intended, Helena replied, her voice resonating strangely as the convergence accelerated under the eye's influence. The catalyst doesn't control the serpent medium, it becomes part of them. That's why the Covenant could never use it properly. The power building within her was tremendous, balanced now between her Parseltongue and psychic abilities. Helena could sense every spirit in the vicinity, could hear them as clearly as the living. Vesper stirred in his box, responding to her transformed energy. Impossible, Vane whispered, though her expression showed she knew it was true. The eye must be external to function as a control mechanism. For you, perhaps, Helena said. But not for one born to this magic. She released Vesper from his box, and the small snake grew as it absorbed some of her overflowing energy, tripling in size and glowing with the same light as Helena's scales. The spirits of the ancient temple responded to her call, manifesting as translucent forms around the chamber, priests and priestesses of the old order, watching and waiting. Vane's assistants backed away in alarm, but Vane herself stood her ground, eyes narrowed in calculation. This changes nothing, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. The convergence is still unstable. You'll burn out within days without proper training only the Covenant can provide. Or I could learn from those who originally mastered these abilities, Helena replied, gesturing to the spirit forms surrounding them. The ones you've tried to silence for centuries. Vane's expression hardened. Spirits lie, Helena. They manipulate. They want things the living can't understand. Some do, Helena acknowledged. Just like the living. That's why discernment matters more than control. Damien moved to Helena's side, looking both awestruck and concerned. Are you all right? Is this safe? Yes, Helena assured him, surprised to find it was true. The eye's integration had stabilized the convergence, allowing her to direct the combined energy rather than being overwhelmed by it. But we need to leave. Now. Vane signaled to her assistants, who raised their wands. I'm afraid I can't allow that. If you won't serve the Covenant willingly, other arrangements must be made. Before they could cast any spells, Vesper surged forward, now large enough to be genuinely threatening. The spirit Helena knew as Sylvia spoke through him, her voice eerily clear. You forget yourself, Keeper, the snake hissed in human speech that everyone could hear. This place is under our protection. You have no power here. The spirit forms around the chamber moved closer to Vane and her assistants, the temperature dropping precipitously as they approached. This isn't over, Vane warned, backing toward the exit. The Covenant has waited centuries for a true serpent medium. We can wait a little longer. Sarah, Helena called as the group retreated. You don't have to go with them. Sarah hesitated, looking between Helena and Vane. I don't have a choice. Not anymore. She touched her throat, where Helena now noticed a thin silver chain bearing a pendant similar to the eye. Bound to service, just like my mother. Just like they planned for you. There's always a choice, Helena insisted. Let me help you break free. Something like hope flickered in Sarah's eyes, but one of the assistants grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Another time, Vane said coldly. When the playing field is more equitable. They retreated through the passage, leaving Helena, Damien, and Vesper alone with the spirit guardians of the chamber. That was incredible, Damien said once they were gone. How do you feel? Different, Helena replied truthfully. Balanced. Like I've finally found the middle path between my abilities. The most prominent spirit form, a tall priestess Helena recognized as Nephthys, approached them. You have done well, young medium, she said, her voice echoing from beyond the veil. The eye has found its rightful vessel after centuries of waiting. What happens now? Helena asked. Now you learn, Nephthys replied. The convergence is stabilized but not complete. The eye will guide the process, but you must master the disciplines of our order. The Covenant won't give up, Damien pointed out. And we still need to find Professor Thornwood. One challenge at a time, Helena said, feeling surprisingly calm despite everything. First, we return to Ravenscroft and expose Vane for what she is. The spirit priestess shook her head. The Covenant's influence runs deep in your world. Direct confrontation would be unwise at this stage. So we just let her continue posing as a professor? Damien asked incredulously. For now, yes, Nephthys advised. Learn from her as she attempts to learn from you. Knowledge flows both ways, and the wise student gathers information from even untrustworthy teachers. Helena considered this. And Thornwood? The man you seek is held in the Covenant's ancestral sanctuary, another spirit volunteered, an elderly man with elaborate scale markings covering half his face. Beyond the northern mountains, in a fortress hidden from magical detection. That's where they'd take Damien if they captured him, Helena realized. And where they'd try to take me if the opportunity arose. Most likely, Nephthys agreed. But now you have advantages they do not anticipate. The eye within you. The spirits willing to aid your cause. And most importantly, the natural balance of your converging gifts. The spirit forms began to fade as the chamber's energy ebbed. Before disappearing completely, Nephthys offered one final piece of advice: trust your instincts, young medium. The path ahead is treacherous, but you need not walk it alone. With that, the spirits vanished, leaving the chamber feeling oddly empty despite its grandeur. We should go, Damien said after a moment. The expedition will be preparing to return to Ravenscroft soon, especially after the incident in the purification chamber. Helena nodded, allowing Vesper to return to a more manageable size before placing him back in his box. The snake seemed different now, more vibrant, more aware. The spirit binding had strengthened under the influence of the eye's power. As they made their way back through the hidden passage, Helena considered what awaited them. Vane would be watching her more closely than ever. The Covenant would be planning their next move. And somewhere, Professor Thornwood was counting on them to find him. "How are we going to find this Covenant fortress?" she asked as they emerged from the passage, carefully sealing it behind them. "I don't know yet," Damien admitted. "But my advisor should have arrived at Ravenscroft by now. If anyone can help us locate a magically hidden stronghold, it's Professor Winters." The return journey to the expedition camp was tense but uneventful. They arrived to find the headmistress herself had arrived with representatives from the Magical Archaeological Preservation Society, who were busy documenting the damage to the purification chamber and interviewing witnesses. "There you are!" Mina exclaimed, rushing to meet them. "Where have you been? Everyone's been looking for you." "Got turned around in the eastern ruins," Helena explained smoothly. "Lost track of time." Mina eyed her suspiciously. "Aha. And that has nothing to do with the fact that Professor Vane just announced we're returning to Ravenscroft immediately." "We're leaving early?" Damien asked, feigning surprise. "Yep. The Preservation Society is shutting down access to the temple after the incident." Mina made air quotes around the word. "Vane looked ready to murder someone when they made the announcement." Helena caught Damien's eye. This was unexpected but welcome news. Getting back to Ravenscroft sooner meant meeting with Professor Winters sooner. As they helped break camp and load the carriages, Helena kept a careful distance from Vane, who was engaged in tense discussion with the Preservation Society representatives. The professor's amber eyes occasionally flicked in Helena's direction, calculating and cold. Just before boarding their carriage, Helena felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Sarah standing there, looking pale but determined. "This isn't over," Sarah said quietly. "She's already planning the next move." "I know," Helena replied. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah touched the pendant at her throat. "Because I meant what I said about my mother. The Covenant destroyed her. I thought working with them was the only way to understand what happened, but now." She glanced toward Vane, then back to Helena. "There might be another path." "There is," Helena assured her. "When we get back to Ravenscroft, find us. We'll help you break that binding." Sarah nodded slightly before moving away to join a different carriage. "Can we trust her?" Damien asked, having overheard the exchange. "I don't know," Helena admitted. "But I think she deserves a chance." As their carriage began the journey back to Ravenscroft, Helena watched the Temple of Eternal Communion recede into the distance. The eye's power hummed steadily within her, neither overwhelming nor dormant, but perfectly balanced between her dual gifts. For the first time since discovering her abilities, Helena felt not fear but possibility. The convergence was no longer something happening to her, but something she was actively shaping. The power of a serpent medium, to bridge worlds, to commune with the willing dead, to channel knowledge across the veil, was finally becoming clear not as a curse, but as a responsibility. Vane and the Covenant would come for her again. Of that, Helena had no doubt. But next time, she would be ready. Not just to defend herself, but to rescue those, like Sarah and Professor Thornwood, who had fallen victim to the Covenant's manipulations. The carriage crested a hill, and Helena felt the familiar presence of spirits watching from the temple one last time. They had waited centuries for someone to reclaim their legacy. Now the waiting was over, and a new chapter in the history of serpent mediums had begun. With the eye guiding her convergence and allies both living and dead at her side, Helena would face whatever challenges came next, starting with finding and freeing Professor Thornwood from the Covenant's ancestral fortress. As if sensing her thoughts, Damien placed a reassuring hand over hers. One step at a time, he said softly. Helena nodded, allowing herself to draw strength from his presence. One step at a time. The journey back to Ravenscroft would take most of the day. By nightfall, they would be planning their next move, a rescue mission that would bring them into direct conflict with the Veiled Covenant. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, Helena found herself looking forward to the challenge. The serpent medium had awakened, and the forbidden magic that had slumbered for centuries was alive once more in the world. Chapter 3, Convergence. The fortress looked impossible to breach. Perched on a jagged mountain peak, surrounded by swirling mists that concealed it from both magical and mundane detection, the ancestral home of the Veiled Covenant resembled something from a nightmare. Black stone towers reached toward the storm-heavy sky, while magical barriers shimmered like heat waves around the perimeter. Cheery place, Helena muttered, lowering the enchanted binoculars Damien's advisor had provided. 3 days had passed since their return from the Temple of Eternal Communion. 3 days of frantic planning, of Helena practicing with her newly stabilized abilities, of gathering what little information existed about the Covenant's stronghold. Now they crouched on a ridge overlooking the fortress, the harsh mountain wind biting through their thermal cloaks. Professor Winters wasn't exaggerating about the defenses, Damien said, studying a magical detection device that resembled an ornate pocket watch. Multiple layered wards, alarm triggers, and something else, almost like sentient magic guarding the perimeter. Spirit bindings, Helena corrected, her enhanced senses picking up what conventional magical detection couldn't. They're using bound spirits as guards. I can feel them, trapped, angry, forced to serve. Beside them, Sarah Maxwell adjusted the silver inhibitor collar they'd fashioned to block the influence of her Covenant pendant without removing it, which would have triggered alarms alerting Vane to their location. The northwest tower is where they keep important prisoners, Sarah said, pointing to the tallest structure. That's where they'll have Professor Thornwood. And the ritual chamber will be beneath the central courtyard, it's built over an ancient convergence point. Ritual chamber? Helena asked sharply. What ritual? Sarah looked uncomfortable. I don't know the details. Vane keeps the inner workings of the Covenant secret even from initiates like me. But after what happened at the temple, she's accelerated whatever she's planning. Helena touched her arm where the scales now covered most of her upper body, shimmering with the power of the integrated serpent's eye. The convergence had stabilized over the past days, allowing her to access both abilities separately or in controlled combination. She was learning quickly, guided by occasional communications from the ancient priestess Nephthys, whose spirit seemed able to reach her regardless of distance. We stick to the plan, Damien said firmly. Get in, find Thornwood, get out. No confrontations with Vane unless absolutely necessary. Helena nodded, though she doubted it would be so simple. The Covenant wouldn't let a fully manifested serpent medium slip through their fingers again. Ready for Phase 1? She asked, opening her bag to reveal Vesper coiled inside. The snake had continued evolving since absorbing the eye's energy at the temple. Now nearly 3 feet long, with scales that mirrored Helena's own transformation, Vesper had become a powerful familiar. The spirit of Sylvia remained bound to him, but other spirits could temporarily share the connection when Helena facilitated it. Time to scout. Vesper hissed, raising his head eagerly. Yes, Helena replied in Parseltongue. But be careful. Many dangers. She lifted the snake and closed her eyes, establishing the psychic connection that would allow her to see through Vesper's eyes while he explored the fortress. It had taken days to master this technique under Professor Winter's guidance, but now the transition felt almost natural. Guide him toward the northwest tower, Sarah whispered as Helena's consciousness partially merged with her familiars. Stay close to the ground, the detection wards are focused at human height. Helena nodded slightly, directing Vesper down the rocky slope toward the fortress. Through the snake's eyes, the world looked different, heat signatures clearly visible, vibrations felt through his belly, magical energies appearing as colored auras around objects. Vesper slithered through the first barrier easily, the wards weren't designed to detect serpents, especially ones carrying the magical signature of a serpent medium, which the ancient spells recognized as authorized. The bound spirits noticed his presence but made no move to stop him, some even seeming to withdraw slightly as he passed. "They fear you," Sylvia's voice whispered through the connection. "They sense the eye's power within us." Vesper continued toward the main structure, finding a drainage channel that provided access beneath the walls. Inside, the fortress was a maze of dark corridors, dimly lit by enchanted sconces that cast more shadows than light. Following Sarah's directions, Helena guided Vesper toward the northwest tower. They encountered several Covenant members in their distinctive gray robes but remained undetected as they kept to the shadows. The snake's heat vision revealed guard positions and patrol patterns, information Helena carefully memorized for their infiltration. Finally, Vesper reached the tower base. A spiral staircase wound upward, but the snake detected magical alarms on every step. "Cannot climb," he hissed. "Danger." Helena nudged him toward a small ventilation shaft visible near the floor. Vesper squeezed inside, using the ductwork to ascend the tower. The shaft branched in several directions, but Helena could sense which way to go, a faint psychic impression of a familiar presence. Thornwood. The ventilation shaft opened into a circular chamber near the tower's top. Through Vesper's eyes, Helena saw a sparse room containing a simple bed, a desk, and a figure standing by a narrow window, Professor Thornwood, looking thinner than she remembered but very much alive. "Let me speak to him," Helena directed, channeling more of her consciousness through Vesper. The snake slithered from the vent, causing Thornwood to turn in surprise. When he saw the distinctive shimmering scales, recognition flashed across his face. "Remarkable," he whispered, kneeling to examine Vesper more closely. "A spirit-bound familiar." "Which means?" "Professor, it's Helena," the snake hissed, Sylvia temporarily stepping aside to allow Helena's voice to come through. "We're here to rescue you." Though Thornwood couldn't understand Parseltongue, the intent seemed to reach him. "Miss Blackwood? You've achieved convergence then. Extraordinary." Helena directed Vesper to trace letters on the dusty floor with his tail. "Yes. Coming tonight." "That would be unwise," Thornwood replied, glancing nervously at the door. "Vane has accelerated her plans. The ritual is set for midnight. They're just waiting for—" He trailed off, looking troubled. "More," Vesper wrote in the dust. "For the final component," Thornwood sighed. "A sacrifice with unique magical properties. Someone whose abilities complement a serpent medium's. Someone like Mr. Frost," a cold voice finished from the doorway. Helena felt a jolt of panic as Vesper turned to see Lilith Vane entering the chamber, amber eyes fixed on the snake. Behind her stood two Covenant guards holding a struggling figure between them. "Damien." "No." Helena gasped, momentarily breaking the psychic connection in her shock. "Helena." Sarah shook her shoulder. "What happened?" "They have Damien," Helena said, scrambling to her feet. "They must have detected us somehow." "Impossible," Professor Winters said, emerging from where she'd been monitoring the magical perimeter. The tall, severe-looking woman had arrived at Ravenscroft the day after their return from the temple, bringing resources and knowledge that had proven invaluable. "My concealment spells are flawless." Helena re-established the connection with Vesper to see Vane approaching the snake, her expression triumphant. "A beautiful familiar," Vane was saying to Thornwood. "She's progressed remarkably quickly under your tutelage. Though I suppose most of the credit belongs to her natural talent." "Leave her alone, Lilith," Thornwood said, stepping between Vane and Vesper. "She's just a student. She's far more than that, as you well know." Vane turned to the guards holding Damien. "Bring him here." They shoved Damien forward. His face was bruised, and he moved with the stiffness of someone recently subjected to binding spells, but his eyes burned with defiance. "I told you they'd come for you, Elias," Vane said conversationally. "Predictable, but convenient." Now we have both the perfect vessel and the perfect catalyst for tonight's ritual. He's not a catalyst, Thornwood objected. He's a human being, Lilith. A brilliant young scholar. This isn't what the Covenant was founded for. The Covenant was founded to preserve and control powerful magic, Vane countered. Which is exactly what we're doing. Mr. Frost's unique magical resonance signature makes him ideal for our purposes. Through Vesper, Helena saw Damien lock eyes with the snake, somehow sensing her presence within it. Don't come, he mouthed silently. Take them both to the ritual chamber, Vane ordered. Preparation must begin immediately. She glanced down at Vesper with a calculating smile. And catch that snake. It may prove useful as well. Helena broke the connection just as a guard lunged for Vesper. We need to move now, she told the others, her voice tight with urgency. They're taking Thornwood and Damien to some ritual chamber. Something about Damien being a catalyst. Professor Winter's expression darkened. A blood catalyst. It's an ancient and forbidden practice. What does it do? Helena demanded. It uses one person's magical essence to force specific manifestations in another, Winters explained grimly. In this case, Vane likely intends to use Mr. Frost's natural affinity for convergence magic to amplify your abilities beyond their natural limits, bending them to the Covenant's purposes. She can't, Sarah interjected. Helena has already integrated the eye. Her convergence is stabilized. Which is precisely why she needs a catalyst now, Winters said. The integration was unexpected. Vane had planned to use the external eye as a control mechanism. Without it, she needs another way to influence Helena's abilities. By sacrificing Damien, Helena said flatly. The thought made her physically ill. Not necessarily a fatal sacrifice, Winters clarified, but certainly a damaging one. His magical essence would be permanently diminished. So we go in now, Helena said, already gathering her equipment. Before they can start the ritual. That's exactly what Vane expects, Winters cautioned. This could be a trap. Of course it's a trap, Helena snapped. But what choice do we have? Sarah adjusted her inhibitor collar. I can get us in. The pendant gives me limited access to Covenant facilities, even with the inhibitor dampening its control functions. And I can handle the bound spirits guarding the perimeter, Helena added. They're being forced to serve, I might be able to free them, turn them against the Covenant. Professor Winters looked between them, calculating risks and possibilities. Very well. But we need a distraction to draw attention away from your entry point. Leave that to me, the professor said, removing several small objects from her pack. I didn't become the leading expert on magical disruption by being subtle. They quickly revised their plan. Winters would create a diversion at the fortress's main gate while Helena, Sarah, and a small contingent of specially trained magical security agents that Winters had brought with her would infiltrate through a service entrance Sarah knew of. Once inside, they would split up, Sarah leading the agents to free any other prisoners while Helena headed directly for the ritual chamber. As night fell, they moved into position. Helena felt strangely calm despite the danger ahead. The integrated eye pulsed steadily within her, its energy flowing smoothly through her converged abilities. She could sense the spirits bound to the fortress, feel their restless energy as they patrolled the boundaries of their magical prisons. Ready? She asked Vesper, who had returned safely and now coiled around her arm, partially concealed by her cloak. Always, the snake replied, his scales glowing faintly in the darkness. Professor Winter's diversion came right on schedule, a series of spectacular explosions at the fortress's main entrance, followed by illusory attackers that drew the guards away from their posts. As alarms blared, Helena and her group approached the service entrance where Sarah quickly disabled the locking spells using her pendant signature. Remember, Helena told the security agents, non-lethal force only. Many Covenant members are like Sarah, coerced into service rather than willing participants. Inside, the fortress was in chaos. Guards rushed toward the main entrance while other Covenant members secured sensitive areas. Sarah led the agents toward the prison section while Helena, guided by her connection to Vesper's earlier exploration, headed for the central courtyard and the ritual chamber beneath it. The first bound spirit guardian she encountered manifested as a translucent figure blocking a corridor, the ghost of a stern-looking man in ancient robes, forced to serve long after death. "You may not pass," it intoned, raising spectral hands crackling with painful-looking energy. Helena stopped, then deliberately revealed her scaled arm, allowing the eye's power to shine through. "I am a serpent medium," she said, speaking simultaneously in Parseltongue and the language of the dead that her psychic abilities had begun to unlock. "I offer freedom from your binding." The spirit hesitated, its form flickering. "Impossible. The binding is eternal." "Nothing is eternal," Helena replied, reaching out both physically and psychically. "The old ways have returned. Communion, not compulsion." She focused her converged abilities, creating a channel between her life energy and the spirit's essence. The technique was one Nephthys had shown her during meditative communion, a method to release spirits from forced servitude while respecting their autonomy. The binding spell resisted, centuries of Covenant magic fighting against Helena's intervention. But the eye's power, integrated with her natural abilities, proved stronger. The spectral chains around the spirit became visible, then cracked, then shattered completely. "Free," the spirit whispered in wonder. "After so long. Will you help me?" Helena asked. "Others are bound as you were. And living people are in danger." "The Covenant has much to answer for," the spirit replied, its form already looking more distinct, more present. "Lead, medium. We follow." As Helena proceeded deeper into the fortress, she repeated the process with each bound guardian she encountered. Some required more convincing than others, but all eventually joined her growing spectral army. The Covenant had never imagined their own magical enforcers could be turned against them, a critical oversight that gave Helena a significant advantage. Finally, she reached the courtyard. A stone circle in its center radiated ancient power, clearly the entrance to the ritual chamber below. Two Covenant guards stood watch, looking nervous as reports of the disturbances reached them. Helena stepped into the open, her scaled arms now fully visible, Vesper coiled prominently around her shoulders. "Stand aside," she commanded, allowing the eye's power to emanate from her invisible waves of green energy. The guards raised their wands, but before they could cast any spells, the freed spirits surged forward from behind Helena. Faced with this supernatural onslaught, the guards didn't even attempt resistance, they fled, shouting warnings to others. Helena placed her hand on the stone circle, sensing the complex locking spells protecting it. These were old magic, designed specifically to keep out anyone but high-ranking Covenant members. "Blood will open the way," Vesper hissed, echoing what was becoming a familiar refrain in their journey. Helena nodded, using a small knife to prick her finger. As the blood touched the stone, the circle recognized her unique magical signature, not as Helena Blackwood, but as a serpent medium, a signature the ancient locks had been programmed to admit. The stone shifted, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Helena could hear chanting from below, the ritual had already begun. Moving as quietly as possible, she made her way down the stairs, the freed spirits following like a spectral tide. The staircase opened onto a balcony overlooking a massive underground chamber. Below, an elaborate ritual was underway. In the center stood a raised dais where Damien was bound to an ornate stone table, magical restraints glowing around his wrists and ankles. Beside him, a similar table held Professor Thornwood, though his bonds seemed less severe. Around them, 12 Covenant members in ceremonial robes formed a circle, chanting in an ancient language Helena recognized as an archaic form of Parseltongue. Lilith Vane stood at the head of Damien's table, hands raised as she directed the ritual. On a smaller table between the two bound men sat a crystal bowl filled with a luminescent liquid. "The preparations are complete," Vane announced, her voice echoing in the chamber. "The convergence catalyst is primed. When the medium arrives, as she surely will, we will finally achieve what our predecessors could not, controlled access to the full spectrum of serpent medium abilities, bound to the Covenant service. She won't come, Damien said through gritted teeth. She's smarter than that. On the contrary, Mr. Frost, Vane replied with a cold smile. She's already here. Vane turned, looking directly at the balcony where Helena stood in the shadows. So much for the element of surprise. Helena Blackwood, Vane called. How good of you to join us for this historic moment. Please, come down and take your rightful place in the ritual. Helena stepped forward into the light, allowing everyone in the chamber to see her transformation, the shimmering scales, the integrated eyes, power visibly flowing through her, Vesper coiled regally around her shoulders. I've come for my friends, she said, her voice carrying effortlessly. Not to participate in whatever twisted ceremony you've planned. Bold words from someone outnumbered 12-1, Vane observed, though her eyes narrowed at the sight of Helena's advanced transformation. The integration is more complete than I anticipated. Fascinating. Helena, run. Thornwood called from his table. The ritual can't proceed without you. Silence him, Vane ordered, and one of the Covenant members waved a wand, placing a silencing spell on the professor. Helena began descending the stairs to the main floor, keeping her movements measured and confident despite her racing heart. The freed spirit guardians remained on the balcony, waiting for her signal. You misunderstand the situation, Professor Vane, Helena said conversationally as she reached the chamber floor. I didn't come alone. At that moment, a commotion erupted from one of the side entrances as Sarah led the security agents into the chamber, already engaged in magical combat with Covenant guards. Vane barely spared them a glance. A minor inconvenience. The outer defenses were always a secondary concern. Her amber eyes fixed on Helena with frightening intensity. It's you I wanted here. You, with your perfectly converged abilities. You, with the integrated eye. Why? Helena demanded, moving slowly toward Damien and Thornwood. You already have dozens of coerced servants. Why risk everything for one more? Because you're not just one more, Vane replied, her composure slipping to reveal something like reverence beneath. You're the first true serpent medium in over 400 years. The fulfillment of a prophecy that has guided the Covenant since its founding. This wasn't the answer Helena had expected. What prophecy? That when the serpent's eye found its worthy vessel, the old powers would return to the world. Vane gestured toward an ancient tapestry hanging on the far wall, depicting a figure with scaled arms holding a glowing green object. My ancestors foresaw this moment, the convergence of gifts that would bridge the worlds once more. Your ancestors. Helena repeated, suddenly noticing something familiar in Vane's features, a resemblance to the figures in the tapestry. The last true serpent mediums before the Great Purge, Vane confirmed. The Vane family served as high priests and priestesses of the Order of Eternal Communion for generations. Until the betrayal. What betrayal? The same one playing out now. Vane's voice hardened. Those who feared our power convinced the world we were dangerous, that communion with the dead was unnatural. They hunted us, executed us, banned our practices. The survivors formed the Veiled Covenant to preserve what knowledge remained, waiting for the day the gifts would return. Helena's mind raced. If Vane was descended from serpent mediums, why didn't she have the abilities herself? As if reading her thoughts, Vane continued, the gifts became diluted over generations of hiding. My family maintained certain affinities, but not the full abilities. We became scholars, keepers of the old ways, preparing for a time when a true medium would emerge again. To serve you, Helena said skeptically. To restore what was lost, Vane corrected. To reclaim our rightful place as bridges between worlds. By forcing a convergence through blood ritual? By sacrificing innocent people? Helena gestured to Damien. That's not restoration, it's corruption. Necessary steps, Vane insisted. The Eye chose you, but you lack the generational knowledge, the proper training. Without guidance, you'll repeat the mistakes that led to our downfall. The battle between Sarah's group and the Covenant guards had intensified, spells flashing across the chamber. Several of the ritualists broke their circle to join the fight, while others maintained the chanting, keeping the spell active around Damien and Thornwood. Helena knew she needed to act soon, before the situation deteriorated further. She caught Damien's eye, seeing both pain and determination in his expression. Whatever the ritual was doing to him, he was fighting it. "Professor Vane," Helena said, taking another step forward. "Lilith. If what you say is true, if your family were once serpent mediums, then you know force is antithetical to true communion. The spirits must come willingly. The gifts must manifest naturally." Something flickered in Vane's expression, doubt, perhaps, or old knowledge struggling against centuries of bitterness. "Pretty ideals," she said dismissively. "But ideals didn't save my ancestors from the executioner's blade. Power did, power carefully hoarded and strategically applied. The Covenant has survived by embracing necessity over sentiment. And lost its soul in the process," Thornwood managed to say, somehow breaking through the silencing charm through sheer force of will. "Tell her the truth, Lilith. Tell her what the original Covenant stood for before you corrupted it." Vane's face tightened with anger. "Always the idealist, Elias. That's why you were unworthy to lead, despite your bloodline." "Bloodline?" Helena looked between them, suddenly understanding. "Professor Thornwood is from a serpent medium family too. A deluded branch that abandoned the old ways," Vane said dismissively. "My cousin chose academia over heritage, knowledge over power. A waste of potential." "I chose ethical study over coercion," Thornwood countered. "I chose to wait for abilities to manifest naturally rather than forcing them through blood rituals." Helena had heard enough. While the Covenant members were distracted by the battle and Vane was engaged in her ideological debate with Thornwood, she made her move. Now, she called to the spirits waiting on the balcony. The freed guardians surged into the chamber, their spectral forms creating chaos among the Covenant members, who had never imagined their own bound servants could turn against them. At the same moment, Helena released the full power of the integrated eye, sending waves of green energy throughout the room. The ritual circle around Damien and Thornwood shattered as the ceremonial Covenant members lost concentration. The liquid in the crystal bowl between them began to boil violently, then shattered the container, sending glowing droplets flying through the air. Helena rushed to Damien's side, using her converged abilities to disrupt the magical restraints holding him. "You came," he gasped as the bonds released. "After I specifically told you not to. When have I ever done what I'm told?" Helena replied, helping him sit up. His skin was pale, magical energy visibly draining from him into the ritual apparatus. "We need to stop the energy transfer." The focus stone, Damien pointed weakly to a black crystal set into the head of the table. "It's drawing my magical essence for the catalyst." Helena placed her hand over the stone, channeling the eye's power to counteract its pull. The crystal resisted, centuries of Covenant enchantments fighting against her intervention. She needed more power, more focus. "Vesper," she called to her familiar. "I need help." The snake slithered down her arm, positioning himself over the focus stone. Through their bond, Helena accessed the spirit Sylvia had bound to Vesper, drawing on her knowledge of ancient magical artifacts. "Not enough," Sylvia's voice warned through Vesper. "This ritual is older than me, more complex. You need more spirits." Helena understood what she had to do. Opening herself fully to her converged abilities, she called to the dead who lingered in this ancient place, not just the freed guardians, but all the spirits trapped between worlds by the Covenant's centuries of rituals. "Those who were bound, those who were used, I offer you freedom," she called, her voice resonating with both Parseltongue and psychic power. "Lend me your strength one last time, freely given, and break these chains forever." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Spirits manifested throughout the chamber, victims of Covenant rituals, failed experimental subjects, even ancestors of Covenant members who disagreed with what their descendants had become. They converged on Helena, channeling their collective energy through her to the focus stone. The black crystal cracked, then shattered completely. Damien gasped as the drainage of his magical essence abruptly stopped. "No!" Vane cried, abandoning her fight with the security agents to lunge toward them. "You don't understand what you're doing." But Helena wasn't finished. With the spirits still channeling their energy through her, she turned to Thornwood's restraints, shattering them with a gesture. Then she faced Vane, who stopped short at the sight of Helena surrounded by a whirling vortex of spectral forms. "This ends now," Helena said, her voice overlaid with dozens of others speaking in unison. "The Covenant will no longer bind the unwilling, living or dead." Vane's expression contorted with rage and desperation. 400 years of preparation, of sacrifice, of waiting, you would destroy it all out of naive idealism. You know nothing of what's at stake. Then explain it to me, Helena challenged, maintaining the connection to the spirits but moderating their power. Without the ritual rhetoric. Without the threats. Why is controlling a serpent medium so important to you? Because the veil is weakening, Thornwood answered before Vane could respond. He had managed to free himself completely and now stood beside Helena. "Isn't that right, Lilith? That's what this has always been about." Vane's anger seemed to deflate slightly, replaced by something like grim determination. The boundary between worlds has been deteriorating for centuries. Small breaches at first, manageable through conventional means. But in recent decades, the decay has accelerated. Without controlled communion to regulate the flow between realms, the veil will eventually collapse entirely. Bringing what? Helena asked, though she already suspected the answer. Chaos, Vane said simply. The unregulated dead flooding into our world. Not just the willing, communicative spirits you've encountered, but all of them, the vengeful, the mad, the power-hungry. Ancient entities that were sealed away for good reason. Like Ophion, Helena murmured, remembering the malevolent spirit that had first triggered her convergence. He was merely a herald, Vane confirmed. A first attempt to breach the weakening veil. There are far worse entities waiting to follow. Helena looked to Thornwood. Is this true? He nodded gravely. The theory is sound, though Lilith and I disagreed on methods. I believe natural manifestation of serpent medium abilities would provide balanced regulation of the veil. She insisted on forcing the issue through ritual. Because we're running out of time, Vane snapped. The natural approach might take generations we don't have. Around them, the battle had reached a stalemate. The Covenant members, seeing their leader engaged in dialogue rather than combat, had withdrawn to defensive positions. Sarah and the security agents had formed the perimeter, containing but not advancing. If what you're saying is true, Helena said carefully, then we have a common goal. But your methods are fundamentally flawed. Forced communion corrupts the very balance you're trying to restore. Theoretical objections mean nothing against practical necessities, Vane insisted. Not theoretical, Helena countered. I've experienced both, the forced convergence Ophion attempted and the natural integration with the eye. One was chaotic, painful, destructive. The other brought balance, clarity, control. A single case study proves nothing. It proves everything when it's the only case that exists, Thornwood interjected. Helena has achieved what generations of Covenant rituals failed to accomplish, true, stable convergence of the dual gifts. Vane's gaze moved from Helena to the spirits surrounding her, her expression calculating. Even if I conceded your point about method, the fact remains that one serpent medium isn't enough to regulate the entire veil. The old records are clear, it took dozens working in concert. Then help me find others, Helena suggested. There must be more people with latent abilities that could be awakened naturally. Perhaps, Vane admitted reluctantly. But identification alone took us centuries, and we found no others with both gifts fully manifested. But you found some with partial manifestation, Helena guessed. Like Sarah. Vane's slight hesitation confirmed it. A few. None viable for complete convergence. Because you tried to force it, Thornwood said. The gifts respond to need and affinity, not coercion. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for what happened next. The ground beneath them trembled violently, and a cold wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing many of the torches. The spirits around Helena grew agitated, swirling more rapidly. What's happening? Damien asked, now strong enough to stand without support. The ritual, Vane said, looking genuinely alarmed. When you disrupted it mid-process, you created a breach. Helena felt it immediately, a thinning in the barrier between worlds, centered on the ritual dais where Damien had been bound. The disrupted energy was creating exactly the kind of uncontrolled tear in the veil that Vane had warned about. How do we close it? Helena demanded. We can't, Vane replied grimly. Not without completing the ritual, which is impossible now that the focus stone is destroyed. There has to be another way, Helena insisted, looking to Thornwood. The professor's expression was grave. There is, but it requires sacrifice. Willing sacrifice. No, Damien said immediately. Helena's done enough. Not her sacrifice, Thornwood clarified. Mine. Elias, don't be dramatic, Vane scoffed, though her expression betrayed concern. My bloodline may be diluted, Lilith, but it's still that of a serpent medium family, Thornwood explained. And I've spent decades studying the old ways. I know the proper ritual to seal a breach, one that doesn't require coercion, only willing participation. It will kill you, Vane said flatly. Probably, Thornwood agreed. But better one willing sacrifice than countless victims of a collapsed veil. The breach was growing visibly now, a shimmering distortion in the air above the ritual dais. Through it, Helena could glimpse shadowy forms gathering on the other side, entities eager to cross over, just as Vane had warned. There has to be another option, Helena insisted. There isn't, Thornwood said gently. But you can help ensure my sacrifice isn't wasted. Channel my energy properly, direct it to seal the breach rather than just containing it. I don't know how, Helena admitted. I'll guide you, Thornwood promised. The spirits will help. Vane stepped forward. If you're determined to be a fool, at least let me assist. This particular ritual was always meant for two channelers. Thornwood regarded his cousin with suspicion. Why would you help? This goes against everything the Covenant has worked for. The Covenant exists to prevent catastrophe, not cause it, Vane replied sharply. I may disagree with your methods, Elias, but I'm not blind to immediate threats. The breach pulsed ominously, growing larger. They were out of time for debate. Fine, Thornwood decided. Helena, you'll channel my energy directly to seal the tear. Lilith will stabilize the edges to prevent secondary breaches from forming. They moved quickly into position, Thornwood standing directly before the breach, Helena and Vane on either side of him. The professor began an incantation in ancient Parseltongue, one that Helena understood instinctively thanks to her converged abilities. I offer myself as bridge and boundary, flesh to strengthen the veil, spirit to guard its passage. Power began to flow from Thornwood, visible as golden energy spiraling around him. Helena extended her hands, allowing her scaled arms to connect with this power, directing it toward the breach using the integrated eye's abilities. On Thornwood's other side, Vane did the same, her movements precise and practiced. Whatever else might be said about her, she was clearly an expert in ritual magic. The breach responded to their efforts, its edges beginning to knit together as Thornwood's energy flowed into it. But Helena could see the toll it was taking on her professor, his life force was literally being consumed by the ritual. It's working, Damien called from where he monitored the breach. Keep going. The spirits Helena had gathered moved to assist, forming a protective circle around the ritual to prevent any entities from slipping through as the breach closed. Vesper coiled at Helena's feet, channeling additional spirit energy to strengthen her control. As the breach narrowed to a sliver, Thornwood turned to Helena, his form already becoming translucent as his physical essence transferred to the veil. "Remember," he said, his voice fading, "communion, not control. That's the true way of the serpent medium." "Professor, please," Helena begged, tears streaming down her face. "There has to be a way to save you." Thornwood smiled gently. "I'm not being lost, Helena. I'm transitioning. When you speak to the dead in the future, listen for my voice. I'll be there." With those words, his physical form dissolved completely, the last of his energy sealing the breach with a final pulse of golden light. Where the tear had been, nothing remained but a slight shimmer in the air, like heat rising from stone. The chamber fell silent. Even the ongoing battle had paused as everyone witnessed Thornwood's sacrifice. Helena lowered her arms, feeling a profound exhaustion settle over her. She turned to Vane, expecting renewed hostility, but found the Covenant leader looking at the spot where the breach had been with an unreadable expression. "He always was better at the theory than the practice," Vane said quietly. "Until it mattered most." Before Helena could respond, Sarah approached cautiously. "The security agents have secured the upper levels. Most of the Covenant members have surrendered." "And those who haven't?" Vane asked, suddenly alert again. "Fled," Sarah reported. "Taking research materials and artifacts with them." Vane nodded as if this were expected. "The Covenant doesn't die with one defeat, Miss Blackwood. We've endured for centuries by adapting to setbacks." "Is that a threat?" Helena asked wearily. "An observation," Vane corrected. "And perhaps a warning. What Elias did bought us time, nothing more. The veil continues to weaken. One day, you'll need the Covenant's knowledge as much as we needed your abilities." With that, she straightened her robes and held out her wrists to Sarah. "I assume I'm to be taken into custody?" Sarah looked to Helena, who nodded. As Vane was led away, Helena turned to Damien, who had remained silently supportive throughout the final ritual. "Are you okay?" she asked, noting his still pale complexion. "I should be asking you that," he replied, gently taking her scaled hand in his. "You just lost your mentor. And saved all our lives." "Not all," Helena said softly, looking at where Thornwood had stood. "I keep thinking there must have been another way." "He made his choice," Damien reminded her. "A choice consistent with everything he believed in and taught." Helena nodded, knowing Damien was right but still feeling the loss acutely. They stood together in silence as the security agents finished securing the chamber and tending to the injured. "What happens now?" Damien finally asked. "Now we honor Thornwood's sacrifice by continuing his work," Helena replied. "The right way, through natural communion, not forced control." "And the Covenant?" "Will adapt and return," as Vane said. Helena sighed. "But hopefully with a different approach. Maybe some of them will even help us identify others with potential abilities." "You think that's possible? After everything they've done?" Helena thought of Sarah, of how she had ultimately chosen to help them despite her binding to the Covenant. People can change when shown a better path. Even organizations, eventually. As they prepared to leave the ritual chamber, Helena felt a faint presence, not quite a spirit, but not entirely absent either. For a moment, she thought she heard Thornwood's voice among the whispers from beyond the veil. "Balance," it seemed to say. "Always seek balance." She would. Between her dual gifts, between the worlds of living and dead, between the knowledge the Covenant preserved and the ethical approach Thornwood had championed. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Vane was right about one thing: a single serpent medium couldn't regulate the entire veil alone. But it was a start. 3 months later, Helena stood in the newly established Thornwood Center for Spirit Communication at Ravenscroft Academy. After the events at the Covenant Fortress, the magical academic community had been forced to acknowledge both the reality of the weakening veil and the legitimate role serpent mediums could play in maintaining the boundary between worlds. The center occupied the space where the hidden serpent room had once been, now expanded and renovated into a proper research facility. Helena split her time between completing her studies and training others with partial manifestations of the dual gifts. Progress was slow but steady. Already 3 students had shown promising developments under her guidance. Damien entered, carrying a stack of books. As Thornwood's designated academic successor, he now led the theoretical research division of the center, working closely with Professor Winters to document and analyze the historical practices of serpent mediums. The archives from the Covenant Fortress finally arrived, he announced, setting down the books. The Magical Council had to verify they didn't contain any forbidden rituals. And do they? Helena asked, examining the ancient tomes. Some, Damien admitted. But also valuable historical accounts, records of naturally manifested abilities, meditation techniques, exactly what we need to develop your curriculum further. Helena smiled, running a scaled finger along the spine of the oldest book. Her transformation had stabilized at a new equilibrium, the scales now covered approximately half her body in an elegant pattern that she no longer felt the need to hide. The integrated eye continued to guide her convergence, allowing ever more precise control of her abilities. Any word on Vane? She asked, as she often did. Still in custody, still refusing to cooperate fully, Damien reported. But Sarah mentioned some of the younger Covenant members have been reaching out, interested in our approach. Sarah had become an invaluable ally after being freed from her binding pendant. Her analytical mind and familiarity with Covenant practices made her perfectly suited to identify which elements of their knowledge could be ethically incorporated into the center's work. And the veil? Stable, for now, Damien said. The monitoring spells show no new significant breaches since Thornwood's sacrifice. Helena nodded, though she knew this stability was temporary. Sooner or later, they would face another crisis, another weakening, another entity attempting to break through. But they would be better prepared next time, with more trained mediums, more knowledge, more allies. Vesper slithered across her desk, now a permanent familiar housing not just Sylvia's spirit but occasionally others who wished to communicate specific knowledge. The snake had become something of a celebrity among the students, who were fascinated by the visible manifestation of spirit binding. Visitors coming, Vesper hissed. The council representatives. Helena nodded, having sensed their approach herself. The Magical Council had initially been skeptical of the center, concerned about the potential dangers of spirit communication. Only gradually had they come to accept the necessity of Helena's work. As she prepared for the meeting, arranging demonstration materials and research results, Helena felt that familiar presence again, Thornwood, watching from just beyond the veil. Not gone, just transformed, as he had said. We're continuing your work, Professor, she said softly. Communion, not control. And somewhere, on the other side of the world, in a hidden location known only to her most trusted followers, Lilith Vane's contingency plan was being set in motion. A different approach, a longer game, but with the same ultimate goal, preservation of the boundary between worlds. The veil would continue to need guardians on both sides, those like Helena who communicated with respect and balance, and those like Vane who stood ready to intervene more forcefully if gentle methods failed. The forbidden magic of the serpent mediums had returned to the world. Whether it would bring harmony or chaos remained to be seen. But Helena was determined to ensure Thornwood's sacrifice set the tone for what followed, ethical communion between worlds, guided by understanding rather than fear. As the council representatives entered the center, Helena straightened her shoulders and prepared to demonstrate once again that the most powerful magic wasn't found in control or coercion, but in connection, the natural convergence of abilities united in purpose. The serpent medium would show them a better way. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.